Hi, everybody out there, San Diego Bass Fishing Podcast. Um, this is your host, Bruce Smith. I'd just like to talk about a couple of things before we get into the meat of the podcast. And first of all, please like and subscribe. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. We're looking to get 1,000 subscribers here. Our goal. That's our goal. We had a few technical difficulties with this podcast with Mike Walsh. Um, the For whatever reason, my StreamYard, the video, the audio was cutting out. So Mike just came over to the house, and we sat down here and talked, and we talked for a long time. And this is by far the longest podcast that we've done here so far, and we're pushing like 3.5 hours on this. So you can just turn it on and let her rip. We talk about all sorts of stuff. Mike Walsh was finished fifth place AAA at the recent Western Outdoor News Lake Havasu tournament. So he punched his ticket to go back east to the Bass Nation for next year, and he won a little bit of money to go along with it. He is a wealth of knowledge, to say the least, and he's very specific on the things that he fishes, and it shows. And it's a great conversation. You may have to listen to it in a couple of parts. I'm going to go ahead and put it out here all at once. So, I know people have asked for longer podcasts. They really like the hour and a half podcasts. So we are going to go ahead and just put out the whole thing at once. And we'll, on our next podcast, it's probably not even going to come out next week. We'll probably just do it here. Later this week will be an update on the lakes. I'm going to have Rob McGargle come on and give us an update from the Friends of the Lakes, and see what's going on with the cap and the water level out there. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Enjoy this. Like I said, Mike is a wealth of information, great guy, and he was a pleasure to have on the podcast. So anyway, this is Mike Walsh, and welcome to the San Diego Bass Fishing Podcast, and happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. And today we are having on Mike Walsh. He's going to be our guest this week. It will be airing on Tuesday morning. I got to meet Mike this week at the Western Outdoor News Havasu tournament. He stayed in the same house as a bunch of us did, and I thought he would be a great guest. And he is a wealth of knowledge, to say the least. So, welcome to San Diego Bass Fishing Podcast, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Bruce.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a total pleasure. And I don't know where to start, really, other than you finished fourth.
Oh, fifth. Yeah.
You finished fifth on the AAA for Western Outdoor News.
Yeah.
Havasu 2025.
Surprise, right?
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. But I mean, it's one of those things. The events can go either way. Obviously, like it's a more or less a team format, but each person on the front's different. Some are, you know, trying to do everything by their own, and they just want you to sit in the back, grab the net when you're there.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
he, and then be ready to move when he moves. So it's kind of different. Everybody's got their own experience at the lake. I got one of the guys I drew. He's an Arizona guy. He's fished there a ton, competed big tournaments a ton on Mead, Mojave, Havasu, countless other places. Day two, Alex was from the Central California, Northern California, and he's only ever been there twice. This is only his second time ever being at Havasu, and his first time was, I think, 2008. He said so. No history really.
That was that Alex Klein?
No, Alex Niapis.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you had an Alex Niapis. I forgot about that.
Name, but yeah. But yeah, I mean, so it's different, and he had his game plan, and it basically, like, as the tournament evolved, he just kind of had to roll with it because he didn't have a lot of fallback and a lot of history to go with. And then day
Well,
three, yeah, Zach, he 22 years old, I think. I mean, he for his age, he fished super calm, and he wasn't up there, so it might be totally different if it was really high in the standings. But
mhm.
to fish with him, he was just like chill, relaxed, just rolled with it and kind of took things, had a little game plan, and we took the day for what it was.
How did he feel about, okay, so your day three guy, he knows what position you're in from the day before. So how did
Uh,
he take that? Because you were like in fourth or third or something on the second day, right?
he actually, we didn't really discuss it too much. We talked. We had phone tag, unfortunately, on the day too, so we didn't really end up communicating until maybe like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night. And
Mhm.
so, but he didn't really even know. Like he asked me when we were on the water floating in the marina on the final day. I on the previous night, I asked him. I just said, "Hey, can you give me some information? Like, what kind of things are you doing as far as are you fishing fast? Are you fishing slow? Are you going to bounce around a lot? Are you going to go on the river? Are you going to stay in the lake?"
Yeah,
Um, just obviously trying to pack a tackle bag and be ready for the opportunities. And
yeah,
he said, stand in the lake, and then but bring finesse baits and some flip baits, or some power and stuff. But yeah, we talked. Then the next morning, it was after we met up and we got launched and paired up in the marina. He asked me how I did the day before, and then I told him, and then he was kind of like, "Oh," and he's like, "Well, how'd you do the first day?" And I said, "Well, we had like," so I had a pair of mid to high 16s, and so he kind of looked at me again, like kind of like in a little, oh. He's like, "So where are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, in fourth place." He's like, "Oh," and I kind of felt like at that point maybe he's like, "Oh, I got a little bit of pressure on me," but
yeah,
I told him right after that, I said, "You know what?" I'm like, "We're going to take the day as it goes." I'm like, "No pressure on it. Let's go have fun. Let's try and catch some fish." I said, "You live here. You're fishing fine. It looks like you did better from the, changing going into the second day." I said, "You either made some adjustments, you had a better day." And so I said, "Stick with your plan. Let's see how it goes." And, I'm like, either
yeah,
way, I'm just gonna
yeah.
have a great, whether we find them or we don't, so.
So you've done this whole AAA backseat thing quite a bit. I remember you won a boat from MLF, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, that started. So the whole AAA thing really started out for MLF was, I was interested in fishing bigger tournaments. I had already fished, um, won bass as a pro, or boater, a couple times, and I was like, I looked at the MLF schedule. I kind of liked where they were going. The Delta. I've never been to Delta. Barely been to Clear Lake. At that point, I've been to Clear Lake maybe twice. I'm guessing. And so the Delta, everybody tells you that Delta is this big monster of a place, tidal water, hazards everywhere, boats, construct, trash, all kinds of debris that, you're going to ruin your boat. You could, all these problems. And so I was like, as a trip, I'm like, I'm going to jump in as a co-angler on the MLF and get a free ride around not a free ride, but obviously get a tour of some of the Delta, get an experience of it, and then I'll go from there, and maybe I'll do these as a boater. Um, and the first season I did it, it was a Havasu, a Clear Lake, I believe, and then a Delta. So it was 1-1-1. And again, you're paired up with people, and at least with the MLF, it's you got to catch your own fish.
yeah,
You
right.
got to somebody that's not necessarily wanting you to catch fish, because then you're not leaving them fish, for the following days if they choose to stay there. And so
Mhm.
you get a mixed, you definitely get a much different feel, or a much uh, mixed reactions depending on who you draw. Some guys were
Yeah, no
cool.
shared
Some guys,
weight.
yeah. Some guys were like, oh, after they ask you where you're from and what you fish, things like that. They might, as their day unfolds and maybe things aren't working, they may ask you, do you have experience here? What do you like to throw? That kind of thing. Um, so it's all different. But yeah, so after doing it a little bit, like, so I did the first year, of MLF, it was FLW at that time, I think, really, but
Okay. Yeah.
ML, same deal though. I felt gypped, honestly. I honestly was like, man, I got some tough draws, and I said my days and finishes could have been much better. I cashed like the last check at Havasu. It was the biggest field they ever had at Havasu. I got three different draws, and it was like polar opposites in some ways, and in some ways it was more or less the same thing. But anyways, after the first season, I kind of felt like, I could do this better. I said if I can get some better draws, I could be more competitive. And it's still not really. Uh, it's still very much the luck of the draw. The saying, it's the luck of the draw, really comes into play, because you could have guys that are fishing super slow, and they're doing something so off or maybe so simple or so obscure that it leaves you with a massive opportunity to catch a bunch of fish. Or you can get guys that are running and gunning or burning down a grass line at the delta on a zero tide, and there's 3 feet from the boat to the solid grass mat, and you have no space to do anything. And it's just different, so you kind of got to accept it and try and get in where you fit in, if you will.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, as it went on, it got to, the second year was like, I want to try this again, see if I could do better, just for my own feel, and
Mhm.
it ended up being a thing. Then I was able to share some pre-fishing time, which I think the first year I got no time on the water, show up at the events, you just pack all this stuff, and in hopes of, and then when you talk to somebody, you're hoping that the what they're doing will allow you to uh, be productive and catch some fish behind them. So then it became, I got some pre-fish time, of all places. John Strelick from San Diego. He's one of the competitors up there. He's done it for decades, and he was nice enough to give me a day on the water at one of the events in practice. And then it's just that much better to get on the water, to see the lake, obviously, and
Mhm.
get a support yourself and pack your stuff up and have a little bit more confidence. So,
Yeah.
but it really became a relationship of, we started doing this whole practice pre-fish thing, and then I was like, well, if I'm seeing the water that he's seeing, I got this thing in my head where, would there be a conflict if I decide to fish later? And some of the areas that we fish here, obviously we're competitive on small bodies of water, but we have the very similar mentality going into a lot of the
Mhm.
place, the
Mhm.
bodies of water. So I didn't want there to ever be a clash of, hey, he's taken my spot that I showed him, this and that. And so
Yeah.
I kind of just rolled with the co-angler thing on that. And then for a while I was doing the wombass, and I was getting the best of both worlds, I guess.
Mhm.
Uh,
So how do you, okay, so let's go back and just go real basic here. How do you prepare as a backseater or AAA going into a big tournament like this? Like, how many rods do you take? How many tackle boxes do you take? Do you keep it to a minimum?
well,
What could you do to help out the guys that are thinking about doing AAA?
okay,
What do
so
you do?
definitely for myself, and the problem is for myself, I kind of try and here in San Diego, is whereas I try and fish as many different things as possible, be very comfortable and
Like as many different things as possible. I mean, what do you mean? You have like,
well,
are you talking
yes,
about outfits? Or are you talking about water? Or are you talking about like pre-fishing kind of
no,
stuff?
techniques, things like that. But the problem
Okay.
with that, then you start you have too much tackle, too many things. So
Right.
the my pile when I go, the first year, when I was traveling by myself or in my camper and staying there, I'd probably have like two of the big, like 30-gallon totes, with stuff, and then I'd
Hmm.
probably 15 rods that I brought with me just in case of. Of course, you have like, if you're going to the Delta, no matter what time, if it's spring or summer, whatever, you got your, like, a punch rod or flip rod, you got a frogging rod. You don't want to have the same rod that you're cutting and going back and forth, because it wastes too much time. You got some kind of a heavy reaction rod, maybe a buzz bait, top water, worm and jigging, drop shot. So, I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, you could bring 6, 7 rods on the boat. You can't bring more than that, or you shouldn't. But the whole, all you need is a Cinco and a drop shot as a backseater or co-angler is BS, we'll just say. That may be the case in some situations, but to just blanket say that, it's totally inaccurate. Um, but so yeah, for me, like it depends, like I look at the lake, the time of year when we're going, and then I'll pack reaction, I'll pack, plenty of soft baits, different techniques. And I
Hmm.
pack the rods I bring are actually well, like maybe not necessarily duplicates, but slightly different in case I need to do 2 or 3 of similar things where I don't want to use the same rod. I
Yeah.
may have, I may have like 3 worm and jigging setups, no flipping rod if I'm at Havasu or something. I may have 2 or 3 spinning rods, and
Hmm.
so I hate the idea. I've always tell people too. I'd rather bring it and not need it than need
Yeah.
it and not have it. Then you're chasing it down at a tackle shop. You're doing the overnight tackle warehouse or some other place.
I tried that.
Well, I showed up on the porch after the last day or whatever.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah.
that's the worst feeling is, and I've been there. That's the worst feeling is going somewhere, and it's not necessarily something they told you about or anybody told you about in practice, but maybe the conditions lined up, and you're like, oh, this is gonna kill it. It's gonna work so good, and you don't have it, and
Yeah.
no tech has it, and maybe, and then you're under the gun. You're worried about it, and so that's why I just pack a little heavy. Um, Usually, if I just say I'm going to pack this tackle bag and I start pulling things together out of my garage and all this and that out of the boat and things, it never works out. So I make a pile, and then I have a pile, and then I usually try and go through it as the day goes on or days go on before I'm leaving. I will try and refine it and then eliminate some things that tear up easy, you may need to bring a lot of, worms, robos or Cincos, stuff like that. But yeah, for the most part, I bring what I know that I can do, and
Hmm.
and then I may never throw it. I may never throw it in the tournament. I may never throw it in practice because the conditions don't work. But I've also done very well having those rods rigged up on the boat,
Yeah.
and as the guy's rolling down the bank or rolls up to a spot, I may see something and he's not even looking at it because he's focused on something else. So I pick up a rod, I make 2, 3 casts, first cast maybe, and then all of a sudden, bam, I have a fish in the boat. And if it's MLF, not shared weight, that's exclusively your win or your shot, your victory there. And really, I mean, that's the difference. Sometimes I can count more than the number on my hands the times that I have had a rod tied up and I maybe used it for 5 minutes and it's put fish in the boat, or it started putting the fish in the boat when other things weren't. And then it led
Uh-oh.
back to the whole packing a bag. Yeah, I mean, for me,
Yeah. Pack in the bag.
for me, it's one of those things. I mean, same thing, just like anybody fishing. You could do a little background on obviously season, the lake you're on. You could try and get some information of generally, what techniques are going on or should be. If you're brand new to it, there's obviously there's different people as a co-angler or a AAA. There are people that have hardly any experience and they want to learn. Then there's maybe the guys that are a little older, don't have the boat, they don't have the time, not as familiar, or just don't get the time out, and they just want to be there and kind of experience the tournaments. Um, and then, I don't know, there are people that have done plenty tournaments, and maybe they just like being on the water and feel competitive, but they don't have the budget to be
So that
competitive.
so that is pretty much that's a really a fine line that you're navigating there as far as, okay, say that this guy is new and he came out as a pro just to be a pro and he's kind of doesn't know what's going on, but
The
here
guy,
you are and you've done this for a while. Do How much do you let him know, or how much do you tell him, or what? I mean, do you go up there and take over the trolling motor?
Okay. So like MLF, you can't. So
Okay, yeah.
so this, to be clear, like this past weekend was the first AAA experience for me in Juan Bass. I've boated or done the pro side of Juan Bass like 16, 17 times. So this one was just I was there for the English Marine Customer Appreciation year-end derby.
Which we
And
need to get back to that too.
yeah. Yeah, so Bill Egan was there, the director for Juan Bass. He was there because they had the striper tournament going on. And he came in during the more or less a little bit after our banquet and stuff, and he was hopping around saying how he's got spots that he needs filling, and he happened to stop at the table that I was at, and he was talking to a couple of the guys that were at the table, and so I kind of poked in and said, hey, what's the deal? And he said he had like 17 spots he needed to fill,
Yeah.
but triple A's. And so I was like, all right, well, I threw it out there. And I'm like, I'm already there. I've seen the lake a little bit. I fished a couple days for, the anglers practice and the tournament. And so I had the time off because I put it on the calendar for Juan Bass, and I was kind of late and decided, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. So I kind of already shuffled work around and had it open. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I'm like, if you can guarantee me the spot or whatever, I'll jump in. And he's like, okay. And so that went there. I came home, did some stuff, and got some work done, and headed back out. But yeah, for the 17 times or whatever it's been, I've done, I think, 8 or 9 U.S. Opens. I think a half a dozen Clear Lake Opens,
Oh, okay.
a couple of Lake Havasu Opens when they were in like January, February, like real
February. Yeah.
brutal tournaments. And then so I've done those, and then MLF, I started out as only as the triple, the co-angler, um, to learn to get more time on Clear Lake, and to get some experience with the Delta, just to see the waterway. So
Yeah.
but yeah, if I was on the back, like I have been on the back in the situation you're talking about, say where I'm on the back in the MLF, and the guy's maybe he's giving me a sales pitch more or less on how good he is, or this or that, what he's going to do, and then we show up and we start doing it, and it's either all wrong, or he's way over talked up his game, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and sometimes, or he's out of town, he's never been here. Like I had one guy in Havasu in an MLF event in September, and he was trying to qualify for the championship and the Travelers because he didn't quite make it through his division, and if he threw in another tournament and he finished well enough, then he would end up qualifying for the championship. And so I was with him the first day, and he was like, I'm probably going to be, he was straightforward. I'm from Ohio. I've never been here. I practiced a few days. I found one. He's like, I've been a lot of places on this lake, up the river. He's like, I've got one area that I'm comfortable with, that I'm catching fish, that I'm probably going to hit. And he's like, we're probably going to make 20 passes through it. I said, okay. And he's like, well, I'm probably he's like, but my problem is my limits are like maybe 10, 11 pounds. He's like, it's not going to do anything. I said, well, first of all, you're confident. You know what you're going to do. You know where you're going to go. I said, that's all. I'm like, that helps me out, because if you're not spun out and you're not bouncing from here to there, running all over, I said, it's going to give us a lot of fishing time. At least it'll give me a lot of fishing time behind him. And so I was really positive. I tried to not be his cheerleader, but obviously, reinforce that what he's doing is nothing to worry about, and said,
Hmm.
go, because if you're not fishing with confidence, then you're going to usually miss out a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So fishing behind him, obviously going there, we were talking a little bit. I was kind of getting the feel for what he had done. He was up front, he's like, I'm pitching jigs up against the tulies. I could see these fish cruising, and yada yada yada. And so I was like, oh, okay. Well, I was like kind of shocked at how close he was and stuff, but I was like, all right, sounds good. And we started off, and it was kind of slow, and he was, he was going into one of those things like, first thing you want to do when you pull up to your first spot is catch a fish right away. Gives you some confidence you're doing the right thing,
Hmm.
settles scores. And so it was kind of slow. And then it was kind of, oh man, it was like
Yeah.
this other day and it was like that. And so for me to help him settle, we started chit chatting a little bit, just about like what he fishes and some other things to kind of distract him. And then, all of a sudden we started
Oh
catching.
man.
And so then we catch fish. And then he's got his confidence back and he's not worried about solo motor. I need to go to this lane or that lane and stuff. And so it started working. And then behind him, I was watching what he was doing. He was flipping the edges. I was trying to get back into those areas where he wasn't fishing.
Okay, so anyway, here we are. We're part 3. Mike was nice enough to come over to my house and join me in the studio. We call it the dog room / studio, my office. And because for whatever reason the recording was blanking out, the sound was going out. He lost sound, I lost visuals. Anyway, we did it 3 times and here we are. He came over.
Technology.
Yeah.
Still sucks sometimes.
Still does. So anyway, where were we? We were talking about.
We got lost in the co-angler mess, I think. Like how do you tell someone just starting out what to do?
Yeah.
That's
Like how many outfits do they bring? So a backseater for
MLF
for the club. Say,
for
a new
your
guy.
club. Okay.
Yeah. What would you tell them to bring? We're going to El Cap.
If we're going to El Cap,
Are they going to do
backseater,
research?
I would probably say 3 or 4 poles. Probably a spinning rod, at least one spinning rod, obviously for drop shot, Nico rig. A little darter head can be good, or something swimming, a little ball head with a little Kitech on it or something works really good.
Uh-huh.
A Cinco, so you could kind of really do all that if there's not heavy cover in the water. You could use it on light line. You could use the same pole. Then maybe a jig rod or a creature rod, something like that. And for the most part, depending on time of year, maybe another rod with the top water or whatever.
And you're looking for like generalized rods, not like a specific A-rig rod.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Honestly, and my buddies, some of my buddies are very specific, just like myself.
Yeah.
You don't read the rod and believe what the rod's doing. Every company has their own version because that company usually paid a pro to design the rod.
Right.
Or maybe too many pros to design rods. And then the company said, let me take all my input and make one rod that has most of the things that they all liked or something. But I have several companies of rods that I use. But for the most part, like I believe in, nowadays you get good quality for low end pricing, but longevity is a different thing. And then, just like, same thing, you get some past experience and you keep going with it.
Like the quality of rods nowadays is so much better than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
$100 rod nowadays is like the $300 rod used to be
10 years ago. Yeah.
But I started out, I'm self-taught fisherman. I lived in San Diego, really El Cajon my whole life.
Yeah.
I started out, my mother would take me fishing when I was super young. My earliest memories really are like Choice Lake, a little trout derby. I don't know how old I was, but I was really young. And I started out, and so like I'm self-taught, like literally I would use my holiday money, birthday money, all that kind of stuff, and look forward to buying something with it, and then I would be fishing with it, and then taught myself how to use bait casters. Yeah. I taught myself pretty much everything, but it's one of those things. So eventually as you get older and you say, I need some money, I need a better rod, I need this and that, stuff changes. But everybody's got to go through things. But I'm like probably 20, I'll give it 25 years hardcore bass fishing. I did spend a lot of time saltwater fishing, like sport boats, half day boat, three-quarter day boat.
Because you have a bay boat too. Right?
Well, yeah. I'm
or used to. Or
I do.
I do.
I'm a fish fanatic, junkie, whatever.
Yeah.
As a young guy fishing Santee Lakes, the buddies that I met there, we would all meet up, go fishing, walk around the lakes, so it's like your own little competition each day.
Uh-huh.
But they used to call me, "You're a fish." They'd tell me, "You're a fish." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" "I'm a fish. Everything you do, fish related, this and that, blah blah blah. You're gonna be on TV. You're gonna be doing this and that. You like it's so ingrained in you." I'm like, "Yeah, that would be cool, but reality isn't reality." But yeah, it's just
I have to say, it's kind of entertaining watching you at the end of the day, rigging up for the next day in Havasu at this last tournament.
yeah. I mean, that's the problem. Is sometimes you do stuff. So
There was you really were very intricate and very, tuned in to what you wanted to do and what you did.
Yeah.
Like you were telling me how the fish were biting differently throughout the day, so you went to a lighter jig head, and it was just like, man, you know what? I don't go there. I don't do that.
Well, see, the problem is, and the funny thing, you mentioned that. And so back to travel partner, John Strelick, at first I thought he was shaming me, right? So I bring all this stuff, and then it's like, well, he's got a boat, maybe it's in a slip or in the garage where we're staying.
Yeah.
And so all this stuff he's doing it, he's in his boat. Well, and he may be throwing 5 rods the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So I've got 5 rods to rig up, and he's got all this stuff there, and so maybe he's not doing it all at once, because maybe he's like, I'm only really planning on throwing 3, and so I'll rig up these 3, and the other ones are there, and he has refined his stuff pretty much. Like I'll say this, he has refined it, and I've asked him about it, and so that is
I've
one of
asked
the
him
things.
to be on the podcast, but
Well,
it ain't happening.
he's to be honest, he's a great, very great guy, like very respectable. He's one of the best people I could say I know.
Yeah.
And I've met and,
Yeah.
and come to have a friendship with. But he is very close to the vest, and like he
Right.
likes to keep things
That's yeah.
on the down low, on the hush, whatever you want to call it. So
Right.
I've peeled away a few little layers of the onion and stuff like that, and got to know him. But yeah, he said one of the basic things, first things he says, the more junk you could eliminate, then you're in a better place. Give yourself as few options as possible so that you don't have too much stuff.
That's really.
But it's also
something
confidence.
to think about.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing if you could do it. But
Right.
then if you're used to catching fish on everything, or well, I want to do this and this and this because as a backseater, that one opportunity maybe there it catches you a fish. It's key fish. When you're a boater, game plan, blah 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 blah. So you want to go with it. So
Right.
being on the back, you have to seize every opportunity you can. And so like if I was doing it as a boater, super easy. Obviously you have a boat
Yeah.
on the water, full of tackle.
Right.
The guy in the back, I've been on boats where they didn't even give you a compartment. Like I was on a big tournament one day, granted it's one day. The guy's like, I didn't even empty a compartment for you. I don't care. I'm on tour. I'm doing this next week, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It was raining. I had all my stuff at my feet,
Yeah.
rain gear on. I had a helmet because, we're driving 50 miles. I've got the safe face mask. I've got my drinks, for the day, like a little snack. It's all sitting out, getting wet.
Yeah.
Guy's like, I'm going to be running gunning. To be honest, he's like, do you want a different life jacket so you don't have to take it off and on? I'm like, no, I'll go, and it was like, let's roll with this day, see where it goes. And it started out one way, and it started out like super, super like blunt and just kind of a little rough, really, for sure. And then by the end of the day, he was chatting it up. It was a totally different person.
Yeah.
But he was a guy that was like, co-angler's in the way.
Yeah.
You're only here for observer to make sure that I'm not cheating, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So some people want you there. Some people are okay with you being there. Some people do not want you there.
So as a boater, do I need to have a space, a compartment for the non-boater? My boat's only 18 feet long.
Okay.
19,
Yeah.
whatever.
And see, so technically
It's
they
kinda small.
say you should,
Yeah.
but they don't say how big.
Yeah.
Like my boat is an older boat. It's really set up awesome for a team, or pro-am or anything. Someone on the back deck. The back deck is huge. Compartments on mine are 12 inches bigger than they are now because it's an older boat.
Yeah.
And they haven't slid the console back and
Yeah.
gave you the extra foot up front.
Right.
So when I'm fishing as a boater, I clear out one of those back bins for a guy.
Yeah.
And so much so, like, he opens up, he's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. You know, it's like, my tackle bag will fit in here, or my this or that.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's that. I said, the cooler's right there. There's room for the stuff there. I said, I don't have a space in the rod locker usually. I don't usually go that far, but I say there's rod straps right there, you know.
Yeah.
So I take it to the extreme. I give him the whole bin if he wants it, you know. And being myself, I have a tackle bag where it's at my feet. I would never, if at all possible, want to go into the compartment to re-rig something, especially if it was something you're going to be doing a lot. I want the tackle bag at my feet.
Mm-hmm.
I would want like your extras, or like say it's cold in the morning, rain jacket, whatever, and then you're going to throw it in the bin. I want it in the bin because I don't want to have to wear it.
Right.
I don't want to have to stuff it under my tackle bag. So that's just how it is. So I always give them the bin, and they say, you know, you should give your co-angler some space, but I mean, people don't necessarily read the rules, you know, or all of that, you know, or they talk to everybody else during the pre-tournament meeting when the director is going through the rules, and so it kind of, you know, gets half the time it gets blown off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say a little bit of space is good, because otherwise that can lead to you having problem, anxiety with the guy in the back rummaging through stuff, having his stuff laid down. I've had people lay stuff out way too much.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, I move everything. I try and pull, like, he throws his net down or whatever while we're fishing, or sometimes they don't even want to get it out. But I know he's going to want the net. And so if I'm, as a co, I will ask the guy, or, you know, when we're driving, I'll say, hey, do you want the net out? Do you want to use the net? Well, you know, and so I'll usually grab it and then put it somewhere where I can get to it. I plan on him catching fish.
Mm-hmm.
He may not want to step off the front deck and net my fish or whatever, but I plan on netting his fish unless he tells me otherwise. So I want it where I can grab it quick. And then, you know, they see what effort you put into it, and then that also helps make it a more positive day usually.
Yeah.
For you in the back.
Yeah.
But you know, it can go either way.
Yeah.
So, but
So how did Havasu go for you? Like, can you give us a day by day?
Anglers or
well, how did you do at Anglers? I don't have my computer here. So
I don't even know where I haven't finished, or I haven't looked at the final standings.
Yeah.
I know we're out of the money a little bit.
Oh, okay.
We were out of the money less than a pound. I would say for me, the experience, I don't fun fish Havasu because it's way too crazy, too much chaos. For me, I like to go fishing and relax a little bit.
I'm so glad you said that.
I will spin myself out, or I would much rather deal with wakeboarders at Sam Vicini.
Am I going to go to Havasu? Am I going to go to Havasu to fun fish?
No.
Myself, not really. I don't think I am. We've had some good fun fishing there in the past, but it was during COVID.
The problem is Havasu can fish really well, and it's a fun place to fish. If you, like COVID, or if you take anything else going on, say Havasu, I've been to Havasu in January, and those big boats still come out.
Sure.
Guys will be running 100 miles an hour, whatever, up and down the lake.
Uh-huh.
It is, okay, so my first trip to Havasu was maybe 25 years ago. Back then, everything was loud, muscle, you know, inboard, built engines, and it just, you feel the vibration in your feet through the water.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, mentally, I'm like, man, these fish, God, it's ruining our fishing, it's changing everything.
Right.
Now the new super, you know, the high-tech outboards and stuff, the supercharged stuff, all the stuff, it's a little better. It's also better on your ears. It's also better, you're not smelling race gas as much. But it's still my head's on, like, I'm on high alert.
Yeah.
Because jet skiers.
Yeah.
Drunk wakeboarder, whoever, you know, there's too many potential, in my mind, there's too many potential instances where you can have an accident, something like that. So I'll go to Mojave.
Right.
Or I'd go to Mead.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if I had other lakes close by, I'd go there. I mean, I started going to Paris a little bit. I mean, not Paris. I've been to Paris a couple times, but recently. But Skinner, I took a friend to Skinner. We wanted to go to Otay. Second Wednesday of the month, Otay was closed, and so he lived up north. I drove. We said, let's go check out Skinner and see how it is. Turned out to be some phenomenal fishing, like awesome fishing last summer, and I went there weekly after that.
Did you? Yeah.
And smashed some good fish. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will always choose for me, fishing, I think from a young age, going up through it, fishing for me is a really a way to reset, calm, kind of let things go, just focus on being out there, taking in the environment, being focused on catching fish.
Yeah.
And so it's like a church, it's like a meditation, it's a relaxation all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of Havasu is, and I tell my my buddies that go there, and I'm like, dude, it's not the place I want to be. It's just too much, the noise, and then you're worried about fish, and the fish Havasu change so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like the patterns change, the bait moves, the stripers move in,
daily.
that. Carp move in. I mean, this time of year the carp are thrashing, right? San Vicente, we saw that a little bit just before we were leaving. There were carp trying to spawn in San Vicente, running through brush where I'm scoping fish or watching fish.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, a big old school of carp comes running through. There were carp busting out in the middle like they were tuna or breakers in Kimball. I was like, this is insane. Havasu just has so much going on. I try and eliminate some of those things if possible.
Yeah.
And so I'll choose to either stay local or fish Mojave.
Okay, so how Western Outdoor News go for you? Like on the daily?
So, fishing the English Marine Tournament, fished a couple days, came home, and then came back. Was trying to get there a little earlier. Had some little car issues, so show up Tuesday afternoon.
We really felt bad for you when we got those texts. Like, oh
that's one of those things. I was like,
wow.
I'm like,
Stuck
I'm either
in your
going to
mind.
drive my car till it blows up or whatever. But
Right.
I honestly now I think it's a little bit more electrical than mechanical.
Oh, okay.
Because on the way home, I had my lights come on again and this and that, and it's driving good. So it's one of those things. It could be computer related or something.
Yeah.
But Havasu, I jumped on. Tom was good enough. I got on the water a couple hours with him,
Oh, that's right.
and he didn't really hit anything. Like he was like his key stuff.
Yeah.
But I asked him, hey, what have you been doing the last couple days? And then the weather that you guys had over the weekend changed everything.
It did.
So I was just like, I was kind of rigged up, and I was like, in my mind, I still had everything in my tackle bag that I was gonna be able to throw.
Yeah.
I wasn't like mad dash to the tackle store, but I really had to wait until I was paired up with somebody to kind of see what they were gonna do, because some guy might have been up the river.
Yeah.
I could have been down at
Yeah.
the bottom river. I could have been drop shotting 30 feet or whatever. So that's being a co-angler, you gotta have
And
stuff.
you had good draws.
I did have good draws. Like that's the one thing. I mean, I kind of went into it like, well, it's kind of like not a freebie, but it was like hey, if you do good, you're on the hook for that. I'm like, that's fine,
Yeah.
But yeah, I had first guy. I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, dude, I know him. He fishes Arizona. He's an Arizona guy.
Yeah.
And then, but he's like, oh, I've only been here 2 days. And I'm like, okay, but you live, he still has lots of history there. and
Lots
stuff.
of history. I remember him winning a Western Wild West.
Yeah, he's done really
2019.
well. Wild
Yeah.
West. He fishes the 60 now.
Yeah.
But he's like, I was just in
watching him this
Mojave.
morning at Mojave.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, cool. I'm like, I like Mojave. I started asking him. I wasn't trying to bug him, but I was asking him a little bit as the day went on. About Mojave.
Yeah.
And asking him what's going on, and what are they doing a little bit. So it was good. And he's like, I remember seeing your face. He's like, you're usually on the front of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm like filling in. So I'm helping out. And so he's like, yeah, I remember you from the U.S. Open. This and that. You caught giant lalo. And so we had good time talking and stuff.
Yeah.
So. But it was, it wasn't reaction fishing. I mean, we tried a little bit of reaction, but it was slow, plucking away. We were both super frustrated because first 2 or 3 bites, I think each person, like myself and him.
Well, that was the day that they wouldn't eat it.
In the
That's what
morning,
they were like short biting.
in the
it
morning,
from
they
whatever,
were
yeah.
like, that storm came through the night
Everybody
before.
was talking about
And
that.
it was like, they were like tight-lipped, lockjaw, didn't want to eat. And so we got bites. We missed. I had one that bit and let him eat. He should have taken it, reeled up, pulls it out of the mouth. And I was like, oh.
Yep.
Threw right back in, get bit again, and then give him a little bit more time, and then have him. And then, like after 10 feet, he shakes off. And I was like, give me a break,
I know.
And so I was like, damn it, I can't. And I'm like, I'm screwing up for this guy. And then, we started getting better, but we still, like, I think for the next couple hours, we still lost several fish.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, oh man, he's apologizing to me because he's not hooking and landing everything. I'm like, man, we're in the same boat right now. I said, I have missed for you, or at least a chance to see what they were, put it in the boat,
Right.
So we weren't fishing clean, and we were kind of like both frustrated about it, but as the day went on, we started plucking them. We got into better fishing where we were catching doubles. He's casting one way, I'm
Right.
going one way.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
So it was kind of different.
So he had some good spots.
Well, so it's weird too. So, and I don't want to. I mean, it seems to me a lot of these people, especially depending on either I guess your history or lack of history, it could be either way. They want to give themselves a small area with as many places to fish as possible, so you're not spending a lot of time running.
Okay.
The guys that are like, I'm fishing the river, then I'm going to fish the bowl, then I'm going all the way to the bill, and then I may do that. They're not going to tell you that. But if plan A doesn't work, plan B might be 30 miles away, and then and then it gets so random, and you could be running the boat race like you're doing a poker run, you know. But so it was good to hear that they were kind of staying close, and but yeah, he was fishing. He had, he told me, he's like, I had 2 days. He's like, I was catching him on this, and I was catching him on this, and then he's like, really? That's because that's all I can get bit on. He's like, the reaction bite wasn't there, and I said, yeah, it's the same thing. I said, the fish were not as far along. They weren't up in the tules. The grass is still barely growing. Not a lot of post spawners yet. This and that. So that was all kind of to it. And so I was like, well, I saw that last week, and I told him, I said, yeah, I was here a couple days fishing, and so it was, we noticed the same thing. Same thing. It kind of kept us clicking and on the same page. Having a scope, being that it's not necessarily a team tournament.
Yeah.
They're not going to necessarily invite you on the front deck.
Right.
So it's like I would look around, or I'd ask him, hey, I see what he's doing. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to step on the front unless you say, hey, get up, follow up rod, or there's a whole school, let's cast, whatever. So I'm fishing, and I'm noticing he's usually, he is using his scope a lot more. Obviously you don't blind cast. If you have the scope or live, we'll call it live stuff. You don't just usually you don't blindly cast unless maybe you're throwing a top water so far or something so far. Or in the tules, you're not gonna see it. But yeah, so he was doing that. I'm just target fishing from what I could see. Either, the rock bones or clean spots, because I don't want to sit there with a jig and clean grass or try and rip grass all the time. I don't have huge confidence in drop shot. I mean, there are times where I'll pick it up, and I've done a drop shot all day, but if I, knowing how good they were biting the jig or the hula grub, stuff like that, I felt much more confident that I was going to catch a better fish on a crawdad bait rather than a little worm.
Yeah.
And it's also the worm gets a little bit more particular. Like they could be on this worm and not on this worm.
Right. We were talking about that.
Feast and famine, same thing. So, so I kept it pretty simple and just kept doing what I was doing and mixed it up between a couple things. And I caught fish throughout the day.
And you guys had 16 pounds or something, right? The first day?
Yeah, we had
I mean,
16 and a half.
bad.
I had, I think he had, it started out, I had a couple fish in there, a couple smallies. He had a couple smallies. We had a couple really weird, like skinny smallies. Like post spawn, like one was sick. We made the comment, like he pulls it in the boat, I scoop it, and he pulls out a net. And he's like, man, this fish stinks. And I was like, is that the fish? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I thought that was like, I caught whiff of like a dead carp on the bank or something, like rotten. Yeah. He's like, no, that's this fish. And then I started looking at it, and its eyes were sunken in. Its back was razor thin. And this is like a 4-pound smallie that probably weighed 2.5.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, this thing might die. And he's like, yeah. He's like that thing might die in the live well from stress. And so we're like, let's watch it, We're able to pull him out. And his afternoon bite materialized to where it was much more visual for him. Yeah. And so for me, I'm still fan casting, blind casting, doing what I can to try and get bit without using scope or say, hey, where do you want me to cast? He's not going to want you to cast right on him because he doesn't want to deal with a tangle or use spooking fish. So, so he became more productive in the afternoon than I did. And so I was just quick to be there with the net and then, help out wherever I could. Day 2, fishing with Alex. He's laid back. He kind of, in practice.
Alex was on day 2?
Alex was day 2.
That's right.
Dylan was day 1. And so Alex, as we said before, he fished Havasu. This was his second time in this tournament. And it was 15 years or whatever, more since he'd been there. And so he was like, I expected to be grass, tules, this, that, power fishing.
Right.
much differently, I guess. And then he showed up, and,
And
he's
there
like,
wasn't
yeah.
much. There wasn't much grass.
No, and he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, what's the deal? And so I'm like, yeah, I'm like, they're kind of behind. And so he was still catching getting fish and getting bites and fish in practice. He said, like power fishing some jig, toolies, but obviously everybody kind of looks for the obvious. And so he had to abandon. And then he said, like day one, he had to switch up, and he found some stuff in the afternoon and started working. So we started with that on day 2, and it was a little slow. I mean, the fish were very spotty. We weren't on schools of fish. We were just targeting. He was more electronics, targeting the map, like the breaks, and
Yeah.
like definition,
Right.
rather than looking for
Specific
a
fish.
lot of fish. Or he wasn't even like he was not trying to fish cages or habitats, whatever you want to call them. He was more looking at the structure aspect
Yeah.
than the actual cover aspect.
Yeah.
Or looking to see a fish and casting it. He would go to his piece of cover on his map, and then he would scan it and see what there was up there, and if there was, then he would throw at it. If there was nothing there, he'd still kind of fan around, and he'd keep panning to look for something
Uh-huh.
for a sign of life on that cover, or structure if there's no cover at all. But he was still tuned, but he wasn't looking for grass. Like Dylan was a little bit more grass oriented, adjacent to the
Right.
rock and drops
Right.
and things like that, where Alex was like, he was more, his afternoon thing was still more structure related rather than cover.
Yeah.
And then it still worked though. Like we did fish a little bit of habitat and stuff.
He did well in the
He
tournament.
did well. First day he
Quite a
had like
check.
15 something, yeah. And then day 2, it was a slow pick. I was lucky. Like we fished a couple spots. He picked the fish off, but it was much slower. Like his first couple spots were dry. Another spot really close by, he catches one. And then we kind of went around the corner, and I was like, oh, I know where he's like, oh yeah, he's like telling me kind of where he's going to set up. So not to just like blindly flail a cast
Right.
out. And so I'm, oh yeah, he throws out, and he's throwing out a little deeper on stuff because he's trying to fish a contour. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to start up shallow and drag it out and hit the thing, because I know, like from my experience, a lot of times smallies like to roam first thing in the morning.
Mhm.
We'll get shallow, and they go deep, and then afternoons, breezy, whatever, they'll come back up and they'll start scouring, looking for food.
Yeah.
So, and I picked up a couple of keepers for us, back-to-back casts, actually, and he was like, man, whatever you're throwing, they're wanting to eat it. And I was like, it's a hula grub. It's a freaking salt plastic. I'm like, hey. But I had downsized from a 5-inch in practice, and from the anglers, a 5-inch hula grub to a 4-inch. And I went from a 3/8 head to a 1/4 ounce head.
Yeah.
Because there was no wind. We were fishing shallow. Sometimes, you throw too heavy, you're going to be hung up in the rock too easy and stuff. So I made those adjustments for myself on day 1, fishing with Dylan. And I was just like, well, if I'm throwing up here in 5 feet of water, working it out to whatever it is, I said, I don't need 3/8. And I don't necessarily want it to like rocket by them if they're kind of off mood. So I went to a 1/4, and then I fished a 5 and a 3/8 ounce.
What
5
kind of
inch.
jig head do you use?
So, well, my favorite is a Gamakatsu football.
Okay.
No weed guard.
Yeah.
And it comes silver. So, okay, here's the other thing. A lot of guys in practice, oh yeah, do you have these? Yeah, well, and I'm like, are they painted? And he's like, no. Man, they're eating it so good, you don't need to worry about it. Well, BS. I'll call BS on it.
Right.
Anytime you can have your jig head match your bait better, you're going to put more fish in the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Bright still, I mean, spotted bass or maybe a smallie, like you'll do something weird, chartreuse head on a whatever body, and you want contrast, or you want the head to be the focus. But I'm a believer on a jig. The fish is looking at it, he's stalking it sometimes. And so you want it to look as good as possible. Not necessarily look as pretty as possible, but you don't want it to be like, hey, this crawdad's wearing a necklace and it's bling diamonds and
Right.
shiny.
And bright, shiny lead.
Yeah, so bright shiny lead is no good to me. So
Yeah.
I'll take them out of the package and either get them to oxidize a little bit. Like someone told me, like you put them in some Coca-Cola, this and that, and it turns them. I just have some powder paint, simple stuff. Just heat it up.
Yeah.
I actually borrowed the lighter from you, heated up some because
That's what you were doing.
I only had a few of them that were painted, and I was like, I had to grab some extras, and so and so I didn't get to it before time. So yeah, I was sitting there, you know, heating up the lead heads and then dipping them in my little thing of powder paint that I brought.
Yeah.
And so I did that
You
with.
don't just use a Sharpie.
You could use a Sharpie, but funny thing on a Sharpie is it doesn't stay black. It
No.
kind of washes off, and then it's
Yeah,
still
it-
it's still different.
It dings up real easy.
We
yeah.
in our eyesight too, like we see it as one color, but you throw it in the water, it's different, and then the fish's eye is even tuned a little differently.
You're right.
And so I just want, like, if I can't color it as close to the bait, I'll just color it black.
Yeah.
I mean, neutral, and
Right.
honestly, I would prefer matte finish over glossy because crawdads aren't usually like nice and shiny clean. They're usually a little sludgy, a little algae growing on them. If you
This
will.
is off the subject, but since we're talking about powder paint, whatever, what do you do with powdered chatterbait blades that the paint flicks off?
At that point, I'd probably, if I'm going to do it, it depends too if it's on the back or the front. If it's on the front,
Well, it's on.
I mean,
a lot of
on
times-
both sides, yeah, it
it's
gets
on both
around the
sides.
edges.
Yeah.
So at that, I'll usually take either a Sharpie if it's just minimal. I'll
Okay.
take a Sharpie,
Yeah.
and then I may do a paint pen,
Yeah.
and then I'll usually clear coat it nail polish or something basic.
Okay.
I know people that'll just cut it off and throw it away. It's like,
Wow.
because well,
Doesn't take
jackhammer,
much.
you can't, you know, you can't change it out. I also have fished the chatterbaits where you have a split ring in between them. You know, there's some companies that make
So
that.
I've opened the ring up on a jackhammer.
No, no.
It's
You don't.
not. It's not. Why I
You
never
don't
had
open
a
the
problem.
eyelet. Yeah. See, you're okay. So
And then I powder coated the blade.
powder coating would be good.
It made it heavier and
Yeah.
it pumped harder.
Yeah.
Is what it did.
Yeah.
But it's stuck for a while.
For a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Okay, go ahead. I want to hear it.
Well, no. So I was
That's
gonna
why
say. So okay. So if you take a
This
hook,
is why I wanted you to come on the podcast.
So you take a
'Cause I knew
hook-
this is not this question specific, but
you take a hook, either the hook point and say it bends out on you, you bend it back. Bend
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's forged or it's
As soon as you bend it, it weakens the.
correct.
Yeah.
So on an eyelet of a jig head or anything, like even the ones that are opened up, you could see the gap, and so you're like, well, I know they slid the blade on,
Uh-huh.
and then it goes here, and then you just close it a little bit. So
Yeah.
you do that too much, it snaps off. Then your whole
Yeah.
jig or chatterbait's useless.
Yeah.
$20 for you might, at that point, you know, if you break it, at least you tried, I guess. Right?
All right. So I've
that's
only
where the
powder
paint or
coated-
the pen
powder coated
comes or
once.
whatever. Yeah.
Now I just Sharpie
Yeah.
it.
And if it's a reaction bite and it's moving, you know, I don't know how fast that blade goes. 50 miles an hour, I don't know. You're doing this.
Yeah.
Or 1,000 miles an hour, whatever it gets. The speed on it, as long as it's not too much shine and you're trying to look dark, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, like some of the blades, a lot of blades I use either had a sticker with color, like a little, you know, like a little peel off,
Yeah.
so they would
Yeah.
gold, hologram,
Yeah.
this or that. It's you know, Jackhammer is one of the companies now, and maybe it started it, like they use colored blades, and so
Yeah.
now even a lot of like the independent guys that make baits and sell them on their pages will offer either coated or painted whatever
Right.
blades and stuff.
Right.
But for the most part, if it's a shad color, gold, silver is still standard, you know,
Mhm.
like bright. If it's your green pumpkins and things like that's where they maybe started black, and then now they're getting into green pumpkins and whatever.
Mm.
I would like to say I would make my own stuff because then I would tune the size of the hook to the weight with the size of the blade,
Mm.
and then you know custom build your own stuff. But then
Yeah.
now we're getting into way too much time, you know, and
Right.
I mean, you could make it if you want it and if you really believed in it, but for the most part, yeah, you throw most of the product that you buy. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to, you know, say you go to a tournament and now you gotta, you know, you made 4 chatterbaits. You just burn through them. And you have the confidence in your chatterbait. What are you gonna do if you don't have the components to make more? You're gonna lose your brain, you know, you're
Yeah.
gonna lose it
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I'm not fishing with what I believe. Same thing goes back to, I've seen it, guys are fishing, oh, I just broke it all off. So now they're like, well, this should work, or this will work. And then you see them fishing, the way they're fishing, they don't believe in it. They're just going through the motions, hoping they get bit to give themselves confidence,
Right.
like they told themselves they have.
Yeah.
So it changes your whole mentality of
Yeah.
fishing.
Yeah.
But
The whole
Well, yeah.
confidence thing is just through the roof. I mean, that's such a big
confidence,
part
yeah,
of the
it's
fishing.
decision making. call it decision abilities, especially now. I don't want to criticize, because there is a lot to fishing that is talent, knowledge, technique, know-how, this now. But you see now everybody's criticizing forward facing for, oh, you don't have to know anything, you just got to be able to
Right.
throw the bait and put it. That's total lie.
Right.
You're doing the same thing. You're observing how they react to things. You're
Uh-huh.
observing to how much movement they want, blah blah blah. So there is skill there for sure.
Mhm.
And there are some people that hate it because it goes away from all the stuff they've learned and grown up doing and spent the time investing in,
Yeah.
as far as structure, cover. Now it's open water, so they're like, oh, well, we're not necessarily open water, but now it's off the bottom, and I have to worry about depth and this, and what do you mean I have to watch a screen
It's
and
almost- it's
operate
more
my
of a
trolling
3D
motor? Yeah,
environment,
it's multitasking to
Yeah.
the max
Yes.
on a fishing boat.
Yeah.
So it's a trip, but I mean it is something that has its place, and like it will definitely, and we've seen it locally, we've seen it everywhere, nationally.
Yeah.
It wins tournaments.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
something that you have to adapt and learn to some extent, or
Uh-huh.
get left behind a lot of times a year for sure.
Right.
So, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So day 3.
well, yeah, well,
What
day
had
two.
happened?
So day two, it was like, let me finish that. Day two.
You had another 16 pounds.
Yeah, but day 2, so yeah, and fishing with Alex, it was slow start, same thing. He had a good one. I had 2 keepers, 2 casts, had a third bite. Fish didn't, for whatever reason, it was sitting still already. I just moved it, hits it, thought for sure he's got it, thumped it hard as it could possibly be almost.
Yeah.
And so that was a little miss, and then that was it. It was a little spot, and so we moved on.
Uh-huh.
And then he bounced around, and then we found still caught some fish, a little slower, a little more dead in between. And then you could see he was, because of his limited experience, he was kind of running out of areas. And so
Uh-huh.
we revisited some and things like that. And then
Now, do you suggest, because you've been to Havasu a lot, so do you suggest a spot, or?
So I did. I was
No.
kind of like, as I went on, as we're moving, we maybe did 2 passes through a lot of his primary stuff.
Uh-huh.
And he was fishing also very slow, because anybody that's, I don't want to say anybody, but a lot of people that have fished and been successful and have the confidence in what they're doing, they could do it until the 8th hour. And then the last half of the hour or last half hour, they load the boat. And so you don't necessarily know when the fish are coming.
Uh-huh.
It's no guarantee.
Right.
Each day is different, the
Yeah.
conditions, all that. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we kind of went through some stuff, but we were still hurting on fish, and obviously it's slower than he was intending, and hoped. And then, so yeah, one of the times I was like, hey, I'm like, I know exactly what you want. I could see it by all the spaces that, all the spots that we're choosing. So if you want to go around the corner, I'm like, there's something here that fits your bill. I said, I don't know if there's fish on it right now, but it's worth a look. It's going to take us 30 seconds to get there, and so we did. And he actually pulled up and sees something, throws out, and I think second cast he catches a 4-pounder.
Yeah.
And so at that point we had a limit. It culled one of my smallmouth out. I had one a little over 2 pounds. It culled that one out, and we were happy about it. And we saw another fish. We fished it for a while. Ended up being small. Bounced
Did you
around.
catch it? You catch that second one? You said it ended up being small.
Oh, it was on a jerkbait. Yeah, it was
okay.
a fry garter. It popped
Oh,
up,
right,
and it
right.
was sitting there, and it would follow stuff. And so, but by looking at it, I think maybe because of positioning, it looked bigger. He's like, it looks pretty big. And so when we ended up catching it, it was too small. It was like, oh, it was small, so we
Yeah.
didn't even eat it.
Yeah.
And then there was another spot where he caught fish on a habitat that had brush, and then bait, like a little, I don't know, we were thinking it was shad by the size, and then they were hanging on it though, the branch, and so I'm like, oh, maybe it's fry.
Yeah.
Like shad wouldn't just be like doing this, but there was a little bit of a shad spawn going on in certain places from what I found out.
Yeah, I heard about
So
it.
I'm like, well,
We
a little
checked-
shad spawn. I'm
actually
like, a little
checked that
shad
out.
spawn. The shad are gonna spawn wherever they have their chance to lay their eggs, because they just scatter them, So I'm like, well, whatever it is, we were there long enough to know the bait just didn't take off like shad would. So I'm like,
Mhm.
maybe they were fry. And fry garters are really fry eaters after about a week and a half, because they get so hungry,
Mhm.
So, but so he catches a fish, and then as he's bringing that one up, we notice like a 5 to 6 pounder comes up with it, and
Following it or on the forward facing?
No, visually following it, like
Okay.
right below the boat, right where we were going to net this one,
Yeah.
and that. So it's coming up out of cover enough to where maybe out of 10 foot, and the water was kind of cloudy in some place. So you see the fish coming up nice, and then you see the one underneath him, excited, and he's following it, and so he's like, oh man, and my bait was already out. I never reel in unless like if you're on the back of the boat or even a team, whatever it is. If they're cast or they're fighting the fish and it's out long enough to where you or it's too soon, whatever, to where you don't want to take the time to reel it in, because then maybe it's at the boat and he's freaking out, especially as a co-angler situation.
Yeah.
So here's a tip or a do not do. If you're a co-angler or fishing in this case at AAA, you're still essentially there to serve a purpose, either net the fish, do whatever you can he needs, right? So I never reel up my rod unless it's going to be in the way of fighting the fish. I will free spool or flip a bail, leave it out of the way, jump up and be with the net. And I'll be there. And if he's following around, I may stand back and wait until it looks like the fish is coming up this side or this side, and kind of judge same thing, like what we've talked, like how excited is he to, do I need to like get the fish, or is he going to bring it up, and whatever. So yeah, we see this, I'm sitting there, and so I see it firsthand, and the fish is coming up.
Yeah.
And bam, he's like, oh my God, do you see that one? I say, yeah, it's big. He's like, yeah, it's like a 5 or 6 pounder to me. And so we fished that spot for a while, and no luck on the second one. We go around, do some spots, and then come back. And then when we came back, the bait was gone, whatever it was, and then the fish was smart enough. It was just like, no, the fish that were there in the habitats would come and cruise around, and then they would just weren't playing. But yeah, so he we did good on that, and then after that we almost had a last minute heroics where same thing, it was close away, and after he got the 4 pounder, I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a couple more things you talked about in the afternoon, the fish coming up into this, and you found them here. So I said, well, here's this and there's this, and because he told me, he didn't seem like he wanted to run far, so I'm not going to recommend 20 miles away.
Yeah.
We've got this, because it's no guarantee. You could bring him to the spot, but if you bring him to the spot and it looks great, but there's no fish on it, you still gonna say it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So that's why I stick with everything as close as possible, if I even say something like that. But yeah, we came in with a little bit of time and fished around, and I had a first topwater bite in the tournament. And it was literally, I'm like, hey, look at this, check this out. And he's like, oh, it looks good. And he's throwing something on the break. I'm like throwing up shallow onto the little bar, and like literally I made 3 casts. I was like, it was so wide. I'm like, there's 1, there's 2. This one's the money, because it was past the edge and it worked up onto it, and literally like maybe 5-6 feet, just fish came up, and he was watching too. You hear it, and you could see the fish. The water was clear. Smallmouth just came up, drilled the thing. And I'm just still working it. I'm like, he didn't get on. And I said, how did this fish not get stuck?
Yeah.
And I could see, I'm like, he's still under it. And you could see the fish is like this. And I just keep working it. I'm not speeding it up crazy. And literally, I'm just watching the fish, and he's staying with it. And he comes up straight underneath it, blasts it again, and doesn't get hooked. I'm like, are you going to bite it a 3rd time? And then he just disappeared.
Yeah.
And so that was like that would have been, and I don't know, I mean, the fish, it was too far away, but it was definitely 2+ pounds, maybe 3.
Yeah.
I don't know, fat, but I was like, that was our chance, because we had a 2.6. My other smallmouth got called out earlier. I had like 2.06 and a 2.60 something. And then I had caught a flathead, I caught a channel. It was weird. It was like trash fish day too. So at least I was getting bit, but not necessarily right species.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we came in good. He was happy. He was happy that he found a new spot for day 3 potentially, where he caught a 4 pounder.
Sure.
Then and then having that other bonus fish, maybe we'll still
And there's
be around.
another 5 pounder there that he saw. Yeah.
And then he had fish, on day 1. He's like, oh, I lost one here. I caught a 3 pounder here, and this, and so that's how day 2 started, was stuff from day 1 that he was trying to build on.
Yeah.
And then day 3, fishing was there.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
You mentioned netting a fish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you talk with your boater about how they want it netted?
100%.
Okay.
And you talk with them before you're fishing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because it is one of those things, like, Everybody's different, obviously.
Yeah.
The net size, what they're doing to, like, if it's a treble hook bait versus a jig versus a drop shot, Cinco, whatever. But first thing I say would be, you know, as a co-angler, or same thing if I'm on the front, I say, here's how we're gonna net the fish. I say, please we're gonna put the net in the water at an angle as the fish is close enough to it. You don't want to throw it in like right on top of the fish, because they see that and they use, especially smallies, like to spook and dive. But I usually will, you know, first thing in the morning or while we're sitting waiting to blast off, I will say, hey, you know, how do you want me to net the fish, or what do you know, are you going to keep the net out? Is it going to be stuck in the hole out of our way? And sometimes they say, no, just leave it there. I will pull it out and I will put it on the back deck, or I'll put it up against the seat so that I can have it, because I know as soon as he hooks the fish,
And it's clear. It's not wound up in something.
yeah, and it's like right there, they're gonna yell net whether they said net or not. And so I'm like, I've been there enough to where I know. So I have it ready for my peace of mind as well as theirs.
Yeah.
Because if they see that you usually have the net out, then they're like, oh, this guy cares. You know,
Yeah.
he's here to be competitive, to help out. Like, I could be like, oh, whatever, I want to net your fish, but you're gonna get like blacklisted probably as a co or whatever. Like, this guy was a horrible guy in the back, don't let him enter your turn, you know, something like that. So I'm trying to be as positive as possible, as good as possible, to help out, even though it's not a team.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, netting the fish is definitely like, don't chase it, don't stab, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
And so if you're a novice, new person to the whole tournament thing or boat thing, ask them. Say, you know, what do you want me to do with the net?
Yeah.
Where do you want me to stand? You know, things like that. I mean, half the time they have too many rods out, or maybe a lot of rods, and then obviously they're bringing it right over the top gunnel where there are rods. So you got to watch yourself, make sure, you know, the pocket of the net's not going to get stuck on guides or eyes or lures. I've had a big fish lost in the U.S. Open that cost me dearly, because I had rod tips sitting on the edge, and the guy, first thing, he picks the net up and like slaps it down, and then the hoop of the net goes right into all these my rod tips. And then I'm fighting my fish, and I know it's a giant, and it's a bass, and I'm staring at him, and I'm trying to have him get the net ready as soon as possible instead of concentrating on the fish. And I end up sitting there, the fish ends up shaking off, losing it in the U.S. Open. And then I was just like, you know, that turns your whole day. You know, it sours it, because big bites there are hard to come by, for sure. But yeah, netting the fish is very important. And some guys will have a tiny net, like he was like, or you know, some people lose their nets too much because they probably don't tie them down, they don't put them back in, they just set it and they fly around thinking it's never going to fly out. Whoosh, gone.
Yeah.
So I hate buying good nets because you always lose them and break them, he said. So he's got an aluminum net, basic mesh that everything gets stuck in. You know,
Nylon.
hooks go through.
Not a nylon.
Yep. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. And
you lose so much time in the day
netting,
getting your hooks out.
You know, if it was something in my case too, like, I will take the time.
It's so
I mean,
bad
there's
for
some
the fish,
technique.
too.
There's some technique to it. Rubber nets. The problem with rubber nets, I think, is that a lot of them are very short basket.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, dragging through the water when you scoop, if you scoop, and then short basket. So I've had people net fish the wrong way, more or less. You say like tail first, they go to net them. I say they propel themselves out, so he's going to shoot out.
Yeah.
So if you can, you always try and net them head first going into the net.
Right.
But yeah, shallow nets, I've seen people like have them in there and the fish flops and actually tumbles back out. All things happen. If the fish hangs a crankbait and it's this big of a net and he can thrash around, he may flop out. So anyways.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Okay, day 3.
Day 3. So day 3, I got Zach. I didn't talk to him like I don't know, you know, we started talking about this earlier. He didn't know where I was as far as placement until the morning of. We didn't bring it up. I don't want to bring it up the night before, because then that's gonna rattle him. But he was mid pack. He's a local, but he wasn't, you know. And he said in practice, you know, I got 20 fish in practice. It was like kind of easy everywhere I went. And so I don't think he put a ton of time into it. I want to say also he said like he hadn't fished there in a month maybe, before the practice. And so I was like, well, whatever. I'm like, he's mid-pack. I'm like, I can't hope that this guy is gonna bust his ass for me or try hard for me. When a big bag for him may be like, oh, okay, well, it's too little too late. But a big bag for me would, help me out for sure. So, but I just said, I'm like, we're going to fish hard, and we did. I mean, he went to spots where he believed best fish are, best opportunities for a good bag. He wasn't bouncing around to all kinds of new shit. Excuse my language there. So he was, he was like, doing some simple stuff, some reaction, and then going to some, looking for some staging areas, some, pre-spawners still moving in. And it wasn't very fast and furious either. I mean, it started out literally like, I think we were on like our third or fourth spot before we caught something. It's pretty slow, and it's like, oh, get one. I'm like, all right, well, it's still very early. When you launch at 6, the day, like, seems like it was like moving fast, but when it was 6, it was like, I think we caught our fish and it was like 7:30 or something like that, 8, our first fish. And so I'm like, oh, it's still early, whatever. Obviously you'd like him quick, but it was a good quality fish, and he wasn't doing anything off the wall. So it was something that wasn't an obscure bite, like it wasn't a random. And so fished. I think we got one more small fish. By then I didn't have anything in there. He was chucking kind of hard patches and stuff and just dragging different things. And then, but he had told me, a Ned rig got some fish yesterday, so tie that on if you want. And so I was kind of blind casting a Ned rig. He was saying I was getting bit on the drop. So I'm like, all right, I don't have to sit there and know exactly where to cast. If I just keep it out of a cage, or something, but I don't get lost, lose my rigging. And so it's fan cast, doing all that as much as possible. And then we get to an area where he's kind of soaking and dragging. Then same thing, I pick up a little creature. I didn't throw my jig that much because of the grass. It was mixing it in between shallow and going through grass. And so I used a little more weedless bait and stuff, but it was just slow. And then bounced around. He switched to like almost a visual, looking for spawners. And flipping a little bit. And I had brought a flipping stick and stuff because he said, hey, we'll be flipping some. We'll be doing this. We'll be doing that. But he's like, pretty much bring like this kind of stuff and you should be good. And so it was one of those things. I'm like, all right, I don't know if that means like you should be able to catch fish and don't bother me, or I'm going to do my thing or what. But it was just one of those things. We're fishing. And then I moved to another spot and I catch a fish while he's doing his thing. And then he catches the fish. And then, so we're kind of building a day on. And then fish weren't bad. Like my first fish was maybe like, I don't know, heavy. It was a heavy 2, I think, or something. And then we fish around and go around and we find a couple spawners that cooperated pretty quick. So that was good. Some decent sized spawners. And we were talking, same thing. I was like, man, I was here a few days ago. I'm like, this whole thing was cloudy. The carp were in here. And then so visually, it's like hard to judge. You go somewhere and you may not know what the condition, especially Havasu. Wind could be, river mucks it all, like if they flush the river, all the trash comes down, all the broken tulies. So it's one of those things sometimes you have to go see. But we caught some fish, and then we found another spawner after we had like a limit and cold. And then we found a spawner that was locked in again. And it was first time it circled around, a little bit of a 20 foot or so, and then it still came back. And then so you put another bait on, and then it's like sits there, looks at it, and gets a little bit more heated. And it was a largemouth. And then you fished it a couple times, and I'm just watching because same thing as a AAA. The last thing the guy wants you to do is throw bait right on the bed while he's working the bed. So another tip, do not just say, oh, it's an open, it's not fun fishing with your buddy. Let's put 2 baits on here. It's going to be even better. No. So I kind of sat there and I was just watching the fish, watching the body language and stuff. And eventually I was like, hey, I'm like, hey, do you want, I'm like, he's got a drop shot this long. I'm like, well, bed fish and the fish are more concentrated down. I'm like, you ever shorten your leader and stuff? And so he would let it sink, the worm would, was salted to where it would sink down. So you just shake and slack. You're not like necessarily up here. So he was doing all the stuff. I wasn't like saying you're, you're doing this all wrong.
Right.
But I was, again, like without me casting, I'm trying to be as positive or maybe give him an idea of something he could do to get better results or results quicker.
Yeah.
And so I think he pulled on it a couple times. I think with a drop shot, it reacted to a jig, and then eventually I was just like, I'm like, do you mind if I throw in there? And I'm like, I got this rigged, and so then it was like, as long as we were taking turns, he would run through a pitch, whatever, and I would pitch in there. And then based on same thing, our direction and stuff, some of the time he was sitting the way the waves and the shade, not the shade, but like I guess glare, and then stuff. He was like, do you see it? I'm like, yeah, it's right here. It's over by this log now. And I'm kind of giving him a play-by-play. So he could see where to pitch in case he doesn't see the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, yeah, it's over by this log. No, it's by that section. And so we're both looking at the bed or at the fish following it around. So we're kind of keeping on it. And then, I end up pitching
So this is kind of a neophyte question or whatever about bed fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Now that fish is doing a 20-foot circle and stopping on certain things, or he's not on the bed all the time.
He's like,
are you always flipping to the bed, or you actually like chase him down with the?
A couple times, like, depending on your approach and the fish and how agitated they get or whatever, you could, like, I'd say test the waters. Like I've done that. Like fish swims off, and if the fish stops, then maybe throw bait on him and see how he reacts. Because if he doesn't like the bait, it might be like he doesn't want that bait regardless of how close it is to his bed. So if he looks at it, kind of is curious about it, then you could like, okay, well, this fish maybe is still hungry or not committed all the way. Maybe he's not really, doesn't have eggs yet on the bed, stuff like that. Because most of these are males, and so, you're going to sit there, and that's a body language thing. I mean, obviously fish can't talk, but they do through their body language. You pitch on it a second time or somewhere off the bed if it stopped.
Yeah.
If it's swimming, you don't keep pitching at him. Usually that just keeps chasing them away.
Right.
It swam around, and it basically came kind of almost under the boat and then swam back on. Second time it swims off, you pitch on it, it looks at it a little bit and then swims off. A couple times it was actually like it swim off the bed and yawn, open its mouth and kind of like almost like strut or show you that it was like upset about you being there, kind of like you're gonna get scared by this fish. But and so we fished for it probably like 10 minutes.
And how far away from the bed are you at this point? Are you
15 feet?
15 feet.
Pretty close. That's the other thing.
That's
it's
close.
Like pretty close. I mean, let's see. In Diamond Valley in the English tournament, I was fishing with somebody else in their boat, happened to have power poles. I don't have power poles.
Yeah.
And so as clear water as is at Diamond Valley, I'm not going to put myself that close to the fish, but the bed was shallow enough. It was laid out to where I was like, I'm going to throw out here and just drag my bait through. I could see the fish moving. Mm-hmm. I was 50 feet away.
Yeah.
And so I'm working I'm fishing a bedfish 50 feet away, and so I basically have to be locked into it. If I turn away, I may lose where the fish moved because there was still cover around it. But usually, you don't just drop up on a fish, but it's one of those things, he's kind of cruising, and he sees one, and then it was like he just stopped, power pulled down, and then, so at least being still will help, and not having to touch the trolling motor and all that. Then you kind of, sometimes the fish forget you're there. But 15 feet, I didn't want to say, hey, you want to back up?
Yeah, right. It's
his deal.
Right.
But he, let me throw a different bait in. I threw a hula grub in on a little bit more weedless and a real slow fall and trying, and we're sitting there, and I was like, I'm like, give it a little hop. I'm like, if it's looking at it and you give it a jump, it's going to be like cats, running after mouse, or you swatting a bug. I said, it's like swatting a bug. He's like, yeah. And so we started doing that, and you could see the fish started like, going after stuff, but like flybys or like lunges. And so we did that a couple times, and then, it was like I switched from a hula grub to a worm. And one of my favorite things is Z-Man because it floats. Mm-hmm. So I was using a worm that stood up a little bit, and whether it made the difference or not, I don't know, but threw it in there, and I was kind of doing a thing. Well, it was on a hook, yeah. So it was there. It was still on the bottom, but it was basically standing up a little bit. Gave it like a little bit of a feeding posture.
Right.
And then kind of giving a little dink, and then same thing. It took like 2 minutes after that. Like with that bait, I literally probably pitched 2 or 3 times,
Yeah.
and then it was on, and then I set the hook, and then he's quick, jumps, gets the net, and we're fighting it, and the thing was dove to the back of the boat, like tried to go around the motor and power pole, so it's still like all hands on deck, and calmed down real quick, and then we just made sure he was settled and scooped him up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing is you don't want to be chasing the fish, going back to netting fish. You don't usually want to be the guy holding a net trying to chase them. Sometimes the anglers are that stressed. Get the fish, and he's got a 7-foot rod and he's fighting it, and it's like, well, your net's 4 feet. How do I get out to 7? Whatever. Like
Right.
They think you're Superman, and you're gonna grab the fish, and it's just like, dude, we bring it here, or if the fish is calm enough, you scoop it. Like sometimes I've been the guy, and he's fighting it, jumps, and then hook flies out, and then basket catch in the net, and they're shocked that you caught, and it's like, and it's just like, yeah, I got to do what I do because you're going to blame me if I missed out, even though it wasn't your boat.
Yeah.
So it happens, Not that it would be really my fault, but I'd rather be Johnny on the spot than watching from the sideline. Oh, you should have got that this year.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, day 3 it rolled around. I got 2 fish. I think 2 fish in our stringer, same thing.
Mhm.
Like we tried some things and
So you
caught some
contributed every
fish.
day?
Yeah. So I think first 2 days I ended up with 1 fish each bag, and then 2 of the fish. Not that the spawn fish was my fish, but we ended up
Right.
getting that one, and then I caught the other, and so that one was big enough though. It stayed. The 2 of them, were big enough to stay in there.
Uh-huh.
So, and it was one of the things. Same thing. We fished around 4 quality bites without bouncing around. I would have loved to say, hey, can we go down here and try this? But I'm, same thing. It's not my place.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to waste his time believing me when he is a local and he has all his knowledge of what he's used to doing and producing. So you gotta have confidence that what he's doing is going to produce too. So
Yeah.
but yeah, just kept fishing with what we were doing, but trying same thing, mixing up the baits again. And it just, we never really upgraded after that. And we weighed just under 14 and a half. And so,
Right.
and he's like, well, I hope that keeps you in check range. And I'm like, yeah, I had a great day. We didn't miss any fish,
Mhm.
nothing that hurt us. We didn't burn through like 15 fish or anything like that, 20 fish. So it was just one of those things. But I still had a great day with all of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, whether we caught I've had bad days that has nothing to do with the person. It might just be the fish weren't biting it, or you have great days of fishing, but with people that are upset with you, or upset and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, the fact that we didn't really miss anything, we didn't see stuff that we could have done, or I didn't feel like we missed the boat, or like missed out on opportunities on the final day.
Yeah.
There's always a what if, or what if
Right.
You don't run around.
Oh, trust me, I had a long drive home.
Yeah.
What if?
Yeah.
What
No,
could have,
and I've been there.
Why? Yeah.
There's nothing worse than, and I told on Alex and I, we talked about this. Well, Dylan even first, because day 1 missed opportunities. He's like, man, he was really hard on himself, and that was kind of good to see that he was expressing it to me, how frustrated and how sorry I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. And I'm like, hey, I understand. I feel you. I feel just as bad myself because I had a couple bites that literally, like, same thing, cast out, there's your bite, you reel up, and just rod's loaded and he's on, and then just clean comes off.
Yeah.
And you're just like, there's no reason. He didn't jump and throw a bait. It just comes off. And so same thing, that's on me. We didn't see the fish. It's pulling like a good one. We ended up having still something small enough we wish we would have called. So that's the what it, well, we probably would have had. Some of those fish that we lost were probably this. So he was kind of like, oh, we should have had 18, 19 probably. That's, I'm like, well, I'm like 16, 50, whatever is still pretty good, considering the day on day 1.
I hate
But missed opportunities for sure.
Anymore. I hate the whole. Oh, I lost a big one. Everybody loses a big, and you're in weigh-in line. And every person in that line is going to tell you they lost a big one.
And I've learned
if they have a small bag, they lost a big one.
I've learned long ago there are people that invent it.
Come on.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I'm straightforward. I don't BS. I'm like, I didn't catch them, or I lost my opportunities. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
they were big.
Right.
I've had tournaments where I weighed 3 fish and I got 5 bites all day, and the 2 were not big ones. So I'm not gonna say they were big ones, but they would have been enough to make me like in the cut and continue on, have a chance for money or whatever. So you have to be, whether it's gonna be a keeper or not, you always want to fish clean, put everything in the boat, unhook it so you could visually see if it was gonna help or not. If it jumps off and you see the fish and it was like it wasn't gonna make the bag anyways, that's fine. But if you start losing too many fish, even if they're not gonna cull, it's like, why are you losing them? Bad hook, maybe your hook is too light, maybe you're not letting them eat it, whatever.
Right.
So then you should, I would think, if you're not landing those fish that you're getting the opportunity to bite, you should also analyze that, like, why are they coming off?
Yeah.
And so that's even more back into refining your equipment,
Right.
or what you're doing, maybe.
Right.
So
I didn't have any, for myself, I didn't have any equipment failures like we would, which I have had in the past. But I just didn't make. I was stubborn in certain scenarios. Like I knew about certain things that were going on, like a jerk bait or whatever. Like
dock talk.
yeah,
We'll call it
right.
dock talk.
Joe mentioned, he's like, you fishing a jerk bait? I'm like, no. And he didn't say another word. And I knew it was going on because I had seen
He asked you
Cody
if you were
Chris-
fishing a jerkbait.
yeah
Okay.
Cody Chris that day
Yeah, you had mentioned that.
annihilate him.
Yeah.
He got
You put on a
six-
clinic right in front of me, and I was
6
like,
of them in front of me, and I'm
Yeah.
like, but did that? I didn't tie one on. For one thing, I just don't like fishing it.
yeah.
The other thing is, I didn't practice that way. It wasn't my fish.
It's a whole different set of circumstances,
Yeah.
areas maybe, things to look for, all that. Yeah.
100%.
It
And
leads
that's
you
what
into
I-
a whole nother,
That's what I told myself. But at the
Snowballs.
same time, could I have?
well,
Could I have fished
yeah.
a little looser instead of just going with my game plan and like slugging it out?
Okay, so
That didn't work out.
yeah.
You know.
Well, yeah, because then you're gonna be like, look at all the time I wasted trying this, and I didn't do it in prep. So you.
Well, that too.
Yeah, you could be bad at, hard on yourself about that,
I didn't
though.
look in practice. And
But some things materialize on the conditions of the tournament day, and not in practice. It
well,
happens
see,
all the
that
time,
did
too.
happen to me.
Well,
and that did work out, but then it didn't work out the third day,
Yeah.
which was weird because I don't know.
yeah, I think that lake, it's part of the lake. Same thing, it goes back to I don't enjoy it. Boat pressure is one thing, but when you put that many boats on the lake, not to mention, practice, they always, a lot of times they say, desert lakes especially, you don't stick the fish. Don't stick the fish.
Desert lakes.
And it's like, well,
Yes.
depending on your practice and how loose or tight your fish are, I would say you need to stick something to know how big the quality
You
is.
have to know how big they are.
Because we both know that little tiny fish will hammer baits,
Yeah.
or they'll pick them up, or they'll give you bites and mislead you.
Mm-hmm.
And then some guys, same thing in practice. We say, oh man, today there were 2 pounders, 3 pounders yesterday, or Derby day they go down to 1 pounders,
Yeah.
or 8 inchers,
Yeah.
and then you're wasting time. And now you're like, did I just waste my time believing this pattern? And it was all just tiny fish. So that spirals. So I'm, and that was another thing I learned. Okay, well, John gets me on the boat, right? So we're fishing, and it's practice, but it's also like I am a guest on his boat.
Mhm.
So what do you want me to throw anything? What would you like? Whatever. And so I'm not up there casting on the side like working the bays. I do not want him to know I'm there if possible, which is hard because I'm a big guy. I walk around boat. I got my tackle
Boat
bag.
moves.
So I don't.
Whoa.
Well, hey, on his no, not so much. Not like that. He's not falling off the boat or getting
Yeah.
drunk. But I don't want to affect his practice.
Uh-huh.
So if he doesn't, if he says no, do what you want, or after a while he's like, I know he's going to do something different, so I don't even need to ask. But every now and again, if he's got it in his mind, he's focused on one thing, he might say, hey Mike, can you throw a drop shot? Can you pitch this? Can you do this? And I'll say sure. So I instantly will sit down whatever I'm doing and pick up what he's doing, because it will give him, hopefully reassurance that
Yeah.
maybe maybe what I'm doing is going to catch him some fish. Maybe it's a waste of time, whatever. So I'm still contributing to his practice. I don't want to be a burden, you know. So
Yeah.
I want to be productive for him, because 2 poles in the water, you know, even if it's on one boat, 2 techniques is better than throwing one bait, trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I'm sure you see it, you'll pick up one, couple casts. Oh, maybe I should try that, and then all of a sudden you're shuffling rods and clipping, you know, doing all that too much. So at least if I could be a help, you know, that's the least I could do, is like legit try and say I want to help in practice or not be a burden.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I asked Rusty actually, because they were both fishing the events, you know, and both of them really said that, you know, I don't really gain anything ever with a person on the back. So it was one of those things, and being both like, they're focused, they're solitary, you know, not dock talk, they're as close to the vest as possible. So it's one of those things, like just allowing me to be on a boat is a big, you know, like I guess a sign that, you know, they say sure, and give you a little bit of credibility and belief that you're going to actually help them, you know. And I don't want to sit there and chat his ear off and tell them you need to throw this or this or this, but so yeah, anywhere you can help. And then he's also watching me practice, and I may be fishing things like jerk bait, crankbait, swim jig, something that he isn't doing, but he's also seeing something work maybe, and so it gives him another option. Or why was maybe the fish was more aggressive than I thought, maybe I should be throwing a little bit more reaction, less finesse. I mean, because, you know, they dominate, you know, out here. John and Wade are killer, like amazing, you know, with finesse techniques and dissecting things. So like, they have patience to do stuff when most people might be going out of their mind, like, can't fish this slow. But again, it goes back to confidence. If you have the confidence, you're doing the right thing, keep your bait where it needs to be, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It just produces results.
Yeah.
But yeah, just goes back to, same thing. Like, if I'm practicing, and I'm on the back, obviously if someone's running a chatterbait, throwing top water down cover, I'm not going to be getting the opportunity to do that in a tournament. So why would I think I'm going to get first shot and run down cover and stuff like that? So being on the back of the boat, you know, you have to have the mindset of, maybe they don't want me casting, even if they're fishing 2 feet off of cover or tule line or something, and it's, say, a flat out there, like, they may still have a problem if I'm casting 50 feet away this way, and, you know, like way off, not the fish that doesn't even know my bait, the fish he's fishing for has no clue that my bait landed over here. So I've had times where people are like upset, like, you're casting ahead of the boat, or you're doing this, and I'm like, man, my fish is in a different time zone that you're fishing. But if it bothers them, I'll reel it, I'll stop. And then you gotta, you know, go back to, you gotta figure something out based on that. So it goes back to being a co-angler. It's different every time, different every day. Sometimes it's from nerves, and they get specific. So you gotta really watch it. So, but yeah, all in all though, great event. Day 3, all 3 of those guys. And I don't want to say you make a friend guaranteed, but depending on how the day goes, what you talk about and things like that. I mean, you may make someone that in the future they see you at an event, you may not even say hi to them, or they might say hi to you. He might come. I've had people in the past come up to me, hey Mike, how's it going? You know, and they're positive because they had a good experience with me being on their boat. Maybe I helped them catch fish that, you know, helped their bottom line, or did something that they learned from that made them better for their bag, if it's MLF, you know. So yeah, if I could always leave with a positive experience, whether it's practice or, you know, or during the tournament, I would, because sometimes these people will come in practice, or you draw them again. And then they're like, oh, how was your practice? Did you practice? How was your practice? And then all of a sudden you're almost like, you're not in with them, but they give you more credit, more trust in your decisions. Yeah. So, and I know, I don't know how many tournaments have you fished, like Wombass or like multi-day events where you have, I know you're in the club and you guys have your boaters, co-anglers kind of thing. Are you all fishing all the time against each other? Or do you have a backseater division and a boater division?
It's a backseater division and a boater. Oh no, we're all against each other.
See that right there.
So yeah, I'm
Can bring
fishing
up
against
a
the back seater.
Yeah.
But we don't always have a back seater. We don't have enough back seaters right now.
Okay.
So a lot of times we'll be
Attention
by
people,
ourselves.
if you're looking to join a club.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're always looking. 36
Um,
active right now.
But it's
Room
one
for
of the
14.
things. If you're on the back and you're fishing, you know, it's still you have to kind of take it for who you're fishing with. If they let you fish with the same person in your club, then you can kind of probably say, maybe, oh, I don't want this guy anymore. He caught him too good behind me.
Oh, I have done that.
And it's like I'm bringing him to the promised
100%.
land, and he's just waylaying on my fish, and I get schooled.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Oh yeah.
you're like, I want to.
And he's a good friend. Like,
Yeah,
but I'm like,
that
dude,
is
you
tough.
I can't fish with you
Yeah,
anymore.
that is tough. See, that's like
You're
I couldn't imagine. I've never personally been in a club, so
I don't like. I mean, you don't want to think that you're missing fish. Like I'm going to catch every one of them through here, but I mean, you know in your head that you're not. But then when you have a guy in the back seat that's proving it,
Yeah,
like that's you got another one.
that was one of my things too. Like, so you're fishing. So say I'm fishing MLF, not shared weight, and you could feel how you're doing if you're catching fish and they're not.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You
I
could
bet.
feel the
Oh,
vibe.
Yeah, change.
I've had guys, like
Sure.
literally my first experience at Havasu, I think it was the very first event. I had a guy that, and he was from Japan, didn't speak English, so he said, more or less, you know, didn't have a translator. But he was literally like, oh yeah, playing like I don't speak English. And he was fishing, and he's going down the bank, you know, and he's straight line. I know what he's doing. I'm watching a little bit, but he's got the trolling motor constantly moving, and he's looking and he's casting and he's kind of working his boat to the bait. And so that's one of the things. I'm like, man, this guy's going so fast. If I cast straight off the side of the boat, I'm trolling by the time it hits on the ground. You cannot drag a jig or anything like the bottom bait at Havasu with all those habitats. You're going to spend your time getting hung up and breaking off.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I was doing was bombing a cast like at a 45, trying to get the sink so that I'm halfway.
Yeah.
Maybe I could work it a little bit as it goes by and reel it up, do it again. Well, he gives me the look over the shoulder and not
Like,
even
don't
looking
throw
at
up
me.
here.
And he's looking, but he's going fast enough, and then he turns the boat. Well, like to run over my line. And then I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, he doesn't speak English. I'm like, okay, so apparently, you know, I'm like, well, okay, he didn't like that. And he goes, instantly goes back to the bank. And I was like, is it because he thought I was too close? So I was like, even farther, but not farther forward, farther out still. Now, I mean, my bait, like I said, at least this bait is 60 feet, 70 feet away from where he's going. Depth is probably, 3 feet versus 25 or whatever that I'm in. And he still had a problem with it. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be a rough day. Rough day, And so after a couple hours, he's fishing around. And this is a long time ago. This is my first year. So it's been 9 years. This would have been 9 probably, I think, because they didn't come this year. And so it's where the new marina was, the Havasu Riviera.
Yeah.
And so it was around that Cane Island that's right there on the breakwater. And so there's habitat, I'm like, same thing. I fished Havasu. I know where a lot of the junk was. They weren't moving stuff or taking it out at that much then. And so I'm like sitting here, and so he's fishing, and I'm like, oh, this is a spot I fish a lot. And so I kind of knew where some of the things were. And so he's fishing around, and it gets to the point he breaks off all his crap that he had tied on, right? So cage, rocks, tules, all this stuff. And he was a Japanese guy, which is great. Like they're tinkerers, they love their techniques and quirky stuff sometimes. Yeah. So he was like, at this point, he was like, oh, I got to power pull down and retie. So he was around the spot, and it was shallow enough, he power pulled down. And then he opens his box, and he's starting to do all this stuff. It doesn't mean I throw over the front of the boat, but I'm like, oh, there's cages out here, and it's deep water and whatever, and it was actually still away from the bow of the boat or the front half. And so I throw out there, and I think first cast, I maybe missed habitat, but I worked the cast, Second cast, I moved it over a little bit, and I'm fishing, And I'm just like sitting here, I'm like, I hope the guy takes a long time to retie all this stuff. And all of a sudden I'm up to the cage and I'm like, and all of a sudden, thump. And I'm pulling this fish in, right? So comes in, and it's just a keeper. Find this thing hard. I'm just like, please get, come in. I need anything. So first fish, get it in. He's like, whatever, goes back to his stuff. I don't even know if I netted. I think I might have lifted it in, or he scooped it right as I was going to lift it in. And so then I check my line, deal with the cages and all that. Throw right back out, same exact spot. Working through. Boom, bit again. I'm like, oh, this one's bigger. And I'm fighting it, and it's like resistance, and it comes up way out there. And then he's like, and then I'm like, net, please. I'm like, please, net, and then he's like, he gets up, and I'm fighting it, gets closer to the boat, scoops it, and he's like, oh, you do good today. And I'm like, he spoke English, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like,
you only need 3 fish.
No, they let you do 5.
Oh, okay.
But I was just like, I'm like, that's 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, in 2 casts. Well, so here's what he does. Power pulls up, moves around the island.
No way.
Power pulls back down.
No way.
Where he first approached.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, this really happened. And I was like, I was just like, oh my God, this really happened, And so I was just like blown away. And I was like, damn it. And so I was like, well, I can tell what is going to be a problem. If I catch anything, especially if it's too soon or too often, it'll be a problem. It's going to rattle him because he has 1 fish in the boat right now.
Yeah.
And it's, he's like on plan B, plan whatever. He's bouncing around. He's doing similar stuff, but different type of habitat and different depth. So he's like not on his first game. He's already going into backup. And so, yeah, that happened. And so I was like, well, I'm worried about it. But it was very challenging. That was one of the reasons I said, man, I felt like I got shafted some of these times where I didn't get a fair shake. Because and so that's where part of day, or year 2 was like, I want to do this over again for my own peace of mind.
Yeah.
To see if I could be competitive or successful. Because being a good fisherman doesn't guarantee you anything. People are like, oh my God, man, you're going to win everything. I'm like, that doesn't work that way. There's no guarantees.
Yeah.
Bad draws are bad draws. If you're a great fisherman and you get a bad draw,
Right.
you still have poor results. And so it's, everybody says, oh man, no, come out and try it. And then they're gonna be like, I could never do that. Well, there you go.
Yeah, my daughter and I have these conversations.
And and people are like, why are you doing it? I'm like, well, and to be honest, it's more of a challenge to do something off the back of the boat with you only being able to react to what they're giving you.
Yeah.
And do what you can.
Yeah.
You're on the front, you get to choose what you want, you got more or less no excuses, right?
Right.
You're in control of your destiny for that day.
Right.
Being on the back, I'm at the mercy of whatever. So to me, that's like next level, which sounds stupid. Next level, crazy. So it drew me in part of the way.
Funny.
Part of the way I was like, so year 2, I'm like, I got, not anything against MLF. Obviously, I like it, right? I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. So I'm like, I'm going back. And I was like, really like, and after Havasu, that was day 2. That was my day 1 guy. And I was fishing there, and I was in my camper. Jennifer was not with me. So she, called, how's the day going, this and that, but, and I explained, and she was just, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I should have never told you. Why don't you just do this as a co-angler your first year if you want, blah, 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 and I'm like, no. Yeah. I'm like, no. I'm like, this is not on you. I'm like, this was my decision. And it comes, with it. But in day 2, I literally, day 2, it's almost a blur now. Day 2, I fished with a guy that was out of town, was 20 pounds in practice, and then he farmed everything the first day almost, and this and that, and so he was on revenge, but he's like, oh, I got this in mind, this is gonna work, this is what I want to do. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, oh, okay, and we're there for like an hour and a half, and he's running the same thing. I'm like, wow, this guy's like committed to this spot.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things. And he's fishing. And I'm like, well, I'm casting over here. I'm casting over here. I'm doing what I can. And he's, oh, you should try this and this. I'm like, no, I'll try what I want first, as long as I'm out of his way. And I knew exactly what he was doing, and I was way out of his way. But he spent all day more or less doing what he was doing. And in the beginning of the day, he told me, I never listened to co-anglers. It's like, I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He's like, I've been screwed over listening to co-anglers or having co-anglers. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, and then I was like, how so? And he's like, well, he's like, I fished Clear Lake. He was telling me his experience. I fished Clear Lake and I was pitching, hooked a fish on a bed, he believed, I think. Breaks the fish off. The guy in the back whoosh, throws right in there, catches his 8-pound. It happened to be, he said, an 8-pounder. I wasn't there, obviously, so I can't verify. Catches a big one. So there you go. That steals a fish. So that's bad. I wouldn't do that as a co-angler either.
Yeah.
But so now all of a sudden I hear of one instance and he's telling me he never believes co-anglers. So I'm like, does that mean I can't say you should go over here, or what about trying this, or what kind of stuff are you on? Like, he's not going to take any help or constructive criticism, whatever. You know?
Yeah.
And so that was my day, and it was like, this was the first tournament, the record field. I had a 5:30 p.m. weigh-in.
Wow.
Super long day.
Yeah.
And so this was early in the day, and I'm like, oh man. I'm like, yeah. And he's just fishing, and he's snagging, and then all of a sudden he snags. This is the new casino, the breakwater. This was while they were still building it. He snags on some junk. It's my only bait. I need to get this one back. And I was like, you have a plug knocker? He's like, no. And I'm like, here, pull it out of my bag. Why bring a plug knocker as a coat? Maybe if they're nice enough, they'll go and help you either get your stuff off or back up the boat and allow you to try and get your bait off so you don't break off your bait. So I'm like, well, here you go. I'm like, I got a plug knocker. Goes up there, gets his DT crankbait that they don't make anymore, original whatever, and he gets it out. And so now all of a sudden he's kind of like a little happier. You know, he ties it back up, starts fishing it, hangs again because he's fishing the erosion barriers. They look like, you know, like the little square grids that are tied together with rebar or braided cable.
Okay.
They have it up the ramp, below the ramp. I noticed they have it below Windsor. It's all erosion control.
Yeah.
So like it's basically the wall going into the new casino. It's all these little things on the point and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Well, those barricade, you know, the attenuators weren't built yet. The marina wasn't finished. So he was fishing that thing. And he's like, the fish are roaming up and down, like pulling into the marina, blah, blah, blah. And so he's fishing that. And then, but yeah, anyways, it was like, all of a sudden, hey, can I use your plug knocker again? Hey, can I use it again? Can I use it again? And he's like, oh, well, you know, and then like, oh, how'd your day one go? And then he starts conversation, blah, blah, blah. And it still got to the point where he didn't want to believe anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm in 13th place, you know, to myself. I'm like, I got 3 fish yesterday. And the guy was, you know, the Japanese guy was mad about it. I got a third and he was really upset when I caught a third because his buddy was in the marina like for a half day, no results. And then he talked to him and I'm sitting there throwing a drop shot and I'm just waiting and long lining it and just soaking it. And I catch a third one. And another one. And I'm just like, Net, please, can you please get them? I get my third one. So this guy was upset, you know. But so day 2, I'm like, man, this is how my day is going to go. But at 3 fish, I had 13. I was in 13th place with 3 fish. That's how tough it was for the co-anglers.
Yeah.
In February. So yeah, this guy was like, yeah, you know, and he started to snowball. Oh man, all this ain't working. All this and that. And then, where's all this stuff? Where are all these people catching these fish with drop shot? And cages and cages. And I'm like, what do you mean cage? I'm like, yep, you don't know where the cages are? He's like, well, he's like, there's cages. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, didn't you saw them in your electronics, right? And he's like, well, yeah. I'm like, did you mark them? Well, no. And I was like, no. I'm like, why not? And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, dude, the fish relate to them. I'm like, that's their house most of the time. And so I was just like, all right, this guy, you know, doesn't put this together. This is what I don't know, maybe he didn't put it together. Maybe he wasn't fishing habitats. But when plan ABC wasn't working, you know, he needed something else. And if I were to tell him, hey, you need to go this and that, you need to find the cages, then it's going to be like he's going to have to pull into a pocket if he went in, if he didn't practice there. Now he doesn't know where the cages are.
Yeah.
So either he's going to drive around wherever he practiced, and then he's going to look for those cages or whatever. And so like halfway through the day, I'm sweating for a fish just to get anything. And he's parked on a spot, and lo and behold, a sneaky little fish comes up behind the boat, and I'm just like, he's locked in, and I'm like sitting there shaking my little jig head minnow, like, on a little, just basically a ball head, not like scoping, but
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, he's interested, and he circles back, comes back, and I'm like, man, I think this is either a bedding fish or he's just curious. And he starts to pull away, and I'm like, okay, a little farther. I'm like, he's back there somewhere, a little far. I'm like, hey, do you mind? I'm like, can we sit here for another minute, or two? Why? I'm like, because there's a fish right there. Well, I need a lot more than a fish. I need 20 pounds to come back or something like that. I'm like, okay. He drives on, and he's doing his stuff. And like 3 o'clock, he comes back. Okay. Where are all these habitats? Where's all that?
3 o'clock.
And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, now you want some info, And then it started with, I'm like, or what are these bait, or what is, I'm like, well, what worms are you throwing? I'm like, I list off like the Havasu 5. Salt River Craw, Desert Craw, Margarita Mutilator, Oxblood Light, and maybe Hologram Shad or something like that. He's like, what's Desert Craw? I'm like, you never seen Desert Craw? Pull it out. It's this right here. Here's a couple, And so we're fishing, and then he's like, all right. He's like, I kind of like the look of that. And he's like, so where are these cages? It's getting later. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, one of these days I'll get a bite, And then I'm like, all right, over here. Bam. And then he's like, pulls up, and then I'm like, yeah, there's cages down here, there's cages over here. And so as we pull up, he's like, all right, I want to go here. Picks up, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, what are you looking at? He's like, well, I'm waiting for you to cast. I'm like, why? He says, you're casting. And he like wants to see where I'm going to cast. If I told him oh, they're over there, and then I cast on the juice. And so I'm like, dude, would you like me to cast on the stuff? I'm like, they're right there. I'm like, see the shadows? Those are cages. I'm like, those are habitats. He fires out, and I'm like this. I hear, net, get the net. And he's like fighting this fish, frantic. Well, he was the guy that left his net in the boat, in the compartment, didn't want it out because it's more exciting. That's what he said.
What?
He had a Phoenix, which had a folding net in the bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
So then you have to flip the compartment, you have to get this net out, and you have to unfold it like whatever amount of times, extend it. Net! And I'm like, where's your net? Oh, it's in the compartment. And I'm like, oh, you have it in the compartment. And I'm sitting here as fast as possible. Get that net! And I'm like, dude. I scoop his fish, and he's like trying to high five. I'm like all happy. I'm like, bro, all day long. All day long. He fishes a couple more cans. Where else is there? I'm like, oh my God. We go around, and I'm like, right over here, there's no habitat. He throws out there, he gets bit on a jig, misses it, and then throws a desert craw that I gave him, catches another one. High five. I'm like, I'm not high fiving, dude. I'm like, all day you wasted my day.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're spun out, you're doing 3 casts in a cove and then gone. You're in the middle of like those things, right? He's spun out, but he was trying to save face for points. So, but you have some good and bad, I'm not going to sweet talk it. There are some bad draws and bad tournaments.
Yeah.
So
That's
not all
what scared me
peaches.
off of
And
AAA.
And like back before we got cut off, you either have the people that are just want to be there,
Yeah.
people that are there to learn, and then
Right.
people that are there for whatever reason. I don't want to learn. I want to be competitive. And it's one of those things. I was able to also fish wombass as a boater
Mhm.
on the boat. And then I got to learn the delta and this and that. And then I felt like uneasy about it. And so I continued on the MLF. And then eventually I had some success. But it's trying. But it also teaches me. I learned what not to do or how not to act or, things like that. So basically it does make you kind of a better person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my biggest thing too was like I was always worried like after fishing a couple of those, is the guy in the back gonna feel like I backseated him if I treat him a certain way or if I'm fishing a certain way?
Mhm.
And so I was a little uneasy also about fishing
Mhm.
like an MLF at first. Like
Yeah.
this guy's gonna but I don't run and gun, things like that. So I would be the guy maybe soaking spots and then maybe he's thinking I'm sitting there too long or doesn't
Oh
want to
yeah,
do
it's always in the
that.
back of your head.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever. So that I don't have to worry about it. But
That's what having backseaters messes me up, because I want to treat them to a good time and make sure that they feel that they are a part of or getting
well,
their
that's the
fair share.
the Wand Bass experience,
And so
supposedly.
I fish differently as a
Wand Bass, I mean, I try and put all the pressure on myself to
Yeah.
catch the fish. So if they catch anything, it's a bonus.
not necessarily.
But I
wand
also
bass.
want them to know that, like, I want their help and I
But-
want them to be competitive for
Yeah.
sure. Make sure they have a good time so that they don't feel like I slagged
Yes.
them or shorted them.
Right. Yeah. Like, I hear the horror stories of.
And I did the
Of guys.
Federation a couple times locally, a couple years.
Yes.
Because that
you
was
did.
my getting my toes wet. Like, okay, well, they got their own division. There'll
Yeah.
be somebody on the boat competing against whatever. And so I'm like, we'll see how it goes. And I didn't have any problems with them.
Now in the Federation, it's your boat.
Yeah.
You give them
Yeah.
trolling motor part
No.
time?
So the
Okay.
year that I fished, it just started where they were back to pro and co.
Yeah.
And so that was a big thing. I didn't want.
Yeah.
I've heard the horror stories. Same
Right.
thing like now you
Half
got to
the
share
day.
half the day, half trolling motor time. Whatever. I'm like,
That's one of the reasons I didn't fish
Yeah.
Federation. Like I'm not going to do
yeah.
this.
And so that year it wasn't, and I was like, all right, I'll try it.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. Like, regardless, though, I think my first one that I did was it was El Cap, and it was a slow bite, but it was quality bites,
Mhm.
And started out slow in the morning, caught one little fish, very stale, and I was just like sweating. And I'm like, man, this guy in the back of the boat's probably thinking I'm an idiot, because he's like, oh, I practiced and I fished and stuff like that, but I hit my lower unit on a rock, so it's in the shop, so that's
Yeah.
why I'm not fishing as a boater.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, well, he knows what he's doing, whatever. And it took a while, but eventually I started getting bites, and then he's not getting bit. And then I'm like, man, I'm like, hey, do you want this? You want a bait? You want a worm? You want this? What I'm throwing? And I'm telling him, I'm like, okay, I'm like, this is what we're fishing.
Yeah.
Even though I'm fishing against him, because I'm in
Yeah.
the back of my mind, I'm like, hey, I'm not turning the boat, whatever. It's just sitting there. But literally, and it just kind of came together, and he chose not to have bait. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm asking multiple times, and so I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just went from a very slow day to where just piecing some quality fish together, and then by the end of the day, he's like, man, you got a good bag now. And it was literally like, I was like, yeah. And I caught towards the end of the day, I caught 2 fish. One was to fill the limit, and one was to cull. And then he's like, he's positive. He's like, man, you got a really good shot. And I'm like, upset because I think he caught 1 fish, And
Yeah.
he didn't want to change. He
Yeah.
caught whatever, but
Well, that's his call.
I ended up winning it. But yeah, I was like, I felt kind of okay, but I felt kind of guilty. But it's just one of those things. I guess you have to get around it.
Okay, so I have one more question for you.
Sure.
And it's an easy one. It's if you're having a tough day, backseater, whatever, what's your go-to? What are you going to tie on to catch your 5 fish limit or whatever?
Where
To
are
turn
we?
your day around.
Let me pick your brain. Here we go. Where are we? Yeah.
No. We're in San Diego.
Usually some sort of soft
We're at
plastic
El
for
Cap.
sure. Yeah, like if I can't get bit on like more aggressive baits, I'll usually use like a shaky head or a Nico.
You
or
go the
something.
worm route.
Yeah, soft plastic route.
Yeah.
If the conditions allow it, and I have no fish, is that what you want? You said to catch 5.
Just a tough day, kind of. What?
Yeah,
what are you gonna
I would say
what are you
depending
gonna
on time
do?
of year, for sure, it'd
Turn
be
it
soft
around.
plastics. If it's getting later, or say it's windy and you're not able to really fish the bottom good, to where you may miss the bites or snag too much, then I'll probably either throw a jerk bait or I'll throw a crankbait. People that know me, I've died in previous years, in the beginning of my tournament career, power fishing too much.
Yeah.
And then, especially when you're fishing with someone in the back that doesn't have the 1-2 mentality, like I'll go for the limit fish, you go for this fish, or
Yeah.
they complement each other.
Yeah.
So I've come in with like the kickers and not 5. So now
So
you gotta learn.
yeah.
Yeah, I am 100%. If I roll, especially practice or fun fishing, I start fast and work my way down to the fish until I start seeing results, and then I may, as the conditions change, I may pick myself right back up to stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have, and people that fish with me too. They know I may have 10 rods on the deck first thing in the morning, because it'll be a timing deal where at any point in time, the conditions could be like those baits could work. And it sounds weird, but I mean, if you have them in the rod locker,
You're not
and
gonna
you're
pick
gonna
'em
pull
up.
them, yeah, correct. You're gonna make do with what you see.
Yeah.
And so, and especially San Diego Lake, some of the spots are so minute or, bait specific, what you could do, that you pick it up for 2 casts and it either shows you results or negative or positive. And
Yeah.
so it shifts. But I bring like the reaction mentality to
Okay.
fishing. Like,
Yeah.
no big secret for people that watch me fish or fish next, but cranking,
Okay,
top
so
water, stuff like that.
at the beginning of your day, what are you bringing out?
At the beginning,
Yeah. So you say you have 10 rods in your deck. That's a lot.
yeah, depending on where.
And you haven't been to the lake in a while.
Well, if you want to go that route, yeah. I mean, it'd probably almost be the same 10 rods regardless of where I'm in San Diego.
Okay.
So it'd be like a deep crank, a shallower crank, a jerk bait, probably a worm like a shaky head or an eco, and then maybe a jig or some craw bait.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it might be an A rig. Very rarely I'll have a drop shot rigged up and on the deck first thing.
You find what time of the year you fish A-rig all year?
To be honest, it's probably been years. I've practiced and fun fished with an A rig a year ago.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I see the results of the A rig going down so bad to where it's like almost a bait you don't want to throw in.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you get the fish conditioned to where they're actively, and it's stupid because people are like, I caught an A rig fish last week, or I catch them all year round. Doesn't mean we're fishing the same areas.
Yeah.
But to me, same thing. If I'm throwing an A rig, sometimes the water's too clear now. I think, the clearer it is, they see it too good.
Uh-huh.
They get conditioned to baits, that. Like
Uh-huh.
too many people throwing the same thing.
Yeah.
You stop seeing results.
Mm-hmm.
So an A rig, like for me, an A rig produced a long time ago. Like I had a day where I had 4 doubles in an afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
like 4-pounder and a 3-pounder. Both it's like they ate at the same time, and it was just one of those things. It wasn't new, but it was where I was fishing it like in areas where half the people probably wouldn't throw it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm out on some things.
Yeah.
Big swim baits. Big swim baits are for me. And I told the guys in the tournament, man, my big swim baits are in the garage most of the year unless I'm fishing the specific area.
What's big? 9 inches, 6 inches,
7 to 10.
7 to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
if you're in a tournament, unless you need that drawing power or you need it for the bait or for fish, for whatever condition, we don't have trout stocks here anymore, so
Yeah.
we don't really. You can do it, but unless you know they're really going to eat it, it's just you're going to draw the fish off the cover
Yeah.
or structure and
Yeah.
bring them out to you, and then now they're
A-rigs.
looking at like
A-rigs are terrible with that.
A-rigs do
Oh.
the same thing. And other thing is, certain times of year, the crappie will follow an A-rig.
Yeah.
Bluegills might follow A-rig. So I have more confidence actually in a single swim bait on a jig head a lot of times than an
Uh-huh.
A-rig.
Uh-huh.
I'll catch them one at a time. And I'll give them and I'll usually fish it a little differently, obviously. I'm not going to bomb it out there in the middle of nowhere. I'll usually, even without, this is before forward-facing sonar.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of damage with stock fish finders without side scan, just graphing and learning the cover layout so I know when I'm positioned somewhere what I'm casting to.
Yeah.
But I'll usually fish, like if I know there's boulders or I know there's this, whatever, I'll be confident to cast without knowing if there's a fish there, and I'll fish my baits through.
Yeah.
But yeah, like now, especially with forward facing, throwing an A-rig on stuff, like you said, you see the fish follow it, but they're not committed to it, or they're following so late, they're never going to bite it. And so it's just a waste of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll throw either a Kitech or some sort of a little swim bait on a little lead head or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'll fish more finesse. And it's just got negative You know, it has less negative things for the fish.
Yeah.
You know, single swim bait, little tiny kick.
Yeah.
At worst, you may bump him or something, and he kind of like goes away or whatever. But like for the most part, it's pretty neutral to positive. He's either going to eat it because it's an easy meal. It's not bold and flashy and all this other stuff. Because there are times where there's not schools of bait swimming around all these fish all the time.
Right.
And so if they see something going by them too much, they're going to be like, "This is fake."
Well, yeah.
Or the wire, whatever it is. You
Yeah.
know, there's lakes where you really have to disguise stuff. You really have to fish small baits, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, honestly, like it's been probably a year, 2 years really when I would say I threw it for a little while and was catching fish.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, yeah, it's been a long time.
Mm.
I don't even throw it in a tournament as a co-angler. And that's hurt me sometimes because that's in certain lakes, especially like the championships, are back east. They're always back east, and they're always in the fall, and it's always schools of bait fish, blah blah blah, you know. But then it's in my mind, and I've had it happen before, where you say you hang it up. What are you doing? You don't know where you hung it up or how you hung it up, but you either have the option to just ask for, you know, hey, can I get a few seconds? Can you try and go back and get my bait? Or you have the braid or the heavy line, and you're just gonna hope that it's only a jig head, and you're gonna pull on it and try and straighten your hook out. So I brought them, but same thing. If it's in practice, you know, I get a little practice usually on the championship, and so I know what kind of cover's down there. So if it's like a wooded area or there's brush pile, and I know that I have to sink stuff out, I won't do it. Like I'll pick something weedless or whatever. Yeah. I won't even throw the rig.
Yeah.
And it's you know it's guaranteed. There's times where I would have put fish in the boat, but it's also sometimes if the guy's moving so much, you're gonna have to try and play like I don't know,
right?
Just figure out a way, troll it. I am not a. There are guys on the back of the boat that they don't consider trolling, but there are guys on the back of the boat that I've seen him. The guy on the motor is doing 80%, buzzing down the shoreline. He's doing his thing, and the guy in the back is sitting there. jerk bait or an A-rig or a swim bait, and I'm just like, dude, at first I was like, that's not trolling, and then you read the rules and they say it. Trolling.
Well, that was the big deal with crappie breaks, right?
Trolling is defined by using the gas engine in gear or whatever. So now,
so you can use a trolling.
I'm like now they're good with, because I strongly believe it's worded that way and defined that way because there are guys that fish that fast that is one of the only things the guy in the back can do with confidence that he's still going to catch some fish. It's throwing A-rig.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But same thing. You better be good at depending on where you're fishing. You know, there's places back east in other states, obviously lakes, that have docks, slips, trees, hazards. So it's like, what are you going to do at Shasta? The guy in the back's throwing an A-rig, and he's hanging up. Guaranteed to happen. Hangs up. You know, you throw the sweet spot, you cast. You didn't know there was a brush pile there or a tree, and he's like, oh my god, I'm stuck. Can you go get my bait? Can you go get my bait?
Yeah.
And then it's like now you're bothering him. So
sure,
that's why I do not throw an A-rig. Like I'll break stuff. The guy's like, oh, I would have gotten it. Don't worry about it, man.
Yeah.
It's only a jig head, or it's only this, or it's only that. If it's like a $15 bait or crankbait, jerk bait, something that's like I either don't have a lot of, or I need it. Like it's right here. I'm like, can we go get it? And then I'll usually cut it off, put it away for a while, and then I'll fish some other stuff. And then if I can't get bit, then I'll break it back out. And most of the time, I don't get hung up and it's not an issue. A couple times I have, and I'll go get it. And it's like, if I can get it out quick, they're good. You don't want to sit there and take forever. But I've been the guy at Havasu getting people's stuff out of the cages, or let's go over here. And they're like, how do you? They're like, yank it on. I'm like, dude, stop. And we'll get, we'll do some different things, either plug knocker, or I'll use a little weight drop and bump stuff off. Yeah. And then
those little weights work good.
They do.
Yeah. I was surprised. I was using it at San Francisco for a while.
Definitely brush, cages, they work great.
Yeah.
But you can't be just wrenching on the rod and stuff, burying the hook in there. You have to just have pressure. Yeah. And then, drop it straight on them. So it's a money saver. Mm-hmm. So is a plug knocker, but a plug knocker takes up more space in the boat. So,
yeah, it's kind of a pain in the ass. But it'll get them back.
Gets your baits back.
A lot of times.
I broke a fish off in the last El Cajon East County tournament. Well, not a fish, sorry. The one at San Vicente.
Yeah.
I broke a crankbait off 3 times. And I'm like, psh, I was like, I barely pulled on it first time. I was like, oh, it's instant. And I pulled up and I'm coming towards it, and then I like keep it tight, and it just breaks. Dink. I was like, oh. And I'm like, well, it's gone. I'm like, but I'm still watching the area. I'm like, we'll see. There's a chance it'll float up, right? Because I wasn't, like this. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like waiting, and I'm like, it'll float a couple more seconds. It was like 15 feet. I'm like, it'll if it's gonna happen, it'll pop up in like 5 seconds. Then I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Turn around, retie another bait, pops up. And I say, hey, I'm like, I'm gonna go get my crankbait. Got it back, scooped it up, tied it back on, checked my line, threw it out. 15 minutes later, maybe if that. Hang it up again, and then I barely pull on it, same thing. And I'm like, breaks off. And one of the times it breaks off was actually, I dropped the plug knocker on it. And then I felt it, and I hopped up, bam, breaks. I was like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
And I came up floating. I'm like, this crankbait is
Wow.
meant to be with me. Or what,
Yeah.
So it's fun. But,
That happened a third time?
I broke it off 3 times.
Oh, the third time you didn't get it back.
No, I got it back.
Oh, you did?
But I broke it off 3 times, and I did get it back, but it broke
Wow.
3 times.
Wow.
I should name that one Lucky, or
Yeah.
I should be lucky. But we caught our biggest fish in that. I caught a big secret 4-pounder on a crankbait
Huh.
at Sam City.
I was over at the casino, the old casino, and I was
Were you?
throwing a crankbait out
Uh-huh.
on it. There's like
In
a
front of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a ridge or a rock pile. It's
Yeah.
super sharp.
Did you? Okay, so Kawaga mussels and Havasu.
I don't know.
We know they have them, right?
I don't. Yeah.
I saw more Kawaga mussels this year on
Yeah.
stuff than I have in past years. And granted, like most of the time the tournament comes there once a year, MLF or whatever. So that's my 1 year. If the Anglers tournament was there, I fished it. But last year I didn't fish it. 2 years ago I fished it, whatever. But it didn't seem like Kawagas were that bad. This year I was seeing Kawagas. I was pulling stuff up.
I didn't see any.
Kawagas on branches. I
Yeah.
pierced them with my jig head,
Yeah.
my hook. Oh, there's Kawagas.
Well, so this is last year, and I was fishing this. It's like this sheer drop off of the. It must be like a brick wall. I'm thinking it's a brick wall.
It's not out super far though, right?
Not real far.
It's a drop.
Like 100 feet from
Yeah.
right in front of the old casino.
Yeah.
It's like there's a reef
But-
out there,
yeah,
but
it's
one
short.
part of the reef is
Yeah.
very rugged. Anyway, I threw a crankbait out there, went it in, I get bit, and it doesn't do much, just doink. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and the fish, I see it come up, and it jumps. Oh, okay, I got my crankbait. And then, but it doesn't go anywhere. And so then, it's still right there, so I started stomping my trolling motor. I said, well, I don't know. And it then jumped again. It's like, what the heck? I was gonna go net it. I was gonna go net the fish. I had my net, chasing after it. And then it jumps again, throws my crankbait. So I got my crankbait back.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's really sharp. I wonder if that's, and it took nothing to break it off. And I was like,
So
what? I wonder if that's ever happened. And I went back in, and the wind was blowing into the beach.
Mhm.
I went back into the beach just like a few feet past me,
Mhm.
and I found another crankbait, a brand new Megabass 300, brand new. Like it had very
Yeah.
few hook marks on it,
Yeah.
and a little piece of string that
Yeah.
came off. Like the guy right before me had lost it on that same thing.
well, that or it could have been there. Yeah, it could have been floating, but yeah, chances are it was pretty close by.
Anyway.
Well, you remember
That's my story.
So you remember Sam Vicente obviously before the dam raise, no Kawagas and stuff,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
So after the dam raise, it was pretty brutal, right?
Yeah.
Heavier line.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Losing
yeah.
lots of
There was
stuff.
amazing amount of quaggas.
You know how much? I mean, like you might burn through, and I don't normally bring a reel or a spool to spool up a reel, but like you're going through, you're catching fish.
Oh yeah.
You may be
yes.
clipping 5-6 feet of line off, and then
Yeah.
having to retie. So throughout the course of the day, you might lose 30 yards on a reel
It's-
if you're using the same reel.
Yeah, especially in
I
the
stopped.
wintertime, it seemed like they were in the bottom. A lot of times they'd be in the bottom of the bush.
Where you're dragging.
Yeah, like worm
Well, at El
fishing
Cap,
or whatever.
so same thing at El Cap when they came in, like that one, like they came in by summer. You know, they were like, oh, we have quaggas. All of a sudden, summertime, it looked like you were fishing the surf at the beach or
Right.
the marina. Like the jetty walls and stuff, everything was solid coagulant. I stopped fishing bottom.
Yeah.
Like 100%. I stopped fishing the bottom or anything that would dive too deep.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to lose my stuff. You crank through. I tried. I'm like, yeah, whatever, you know. And then all of a sudden, dink, you feel the brush and it's gone. All of a sudden, you got nothing.
Yeah.
It literally cuts your line without you pulling that much into it. And I was like, this is a joke, you know.
Joe was saying that.
So I'm like, at best, I'm like, I'll throw Cincos because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
a Cinco, Ica, whatever. It's no big deal. But I'm not throwing crankbaits to rub or bump anything. I'll throw jerkbait if I draw them up, and it totally changed my fishing for a couple years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, like this is my favorite lake, you know.
No, there's no quality.
Now it's almost gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's in San Vicente
which is
now.
another
they're
weird
back.
thing.
San Vicente now the water is drawn down so much. Now everything has coagas again.
Mm.
Well, everything that I noticed, like a lot of coagas on brush again.
Do they only go down to a certain level, like light penetration, or do they?
So
or are they just?
me being okay, I'm in fish tropical. Like I'm a fish guy, aquarium guy. I've
Yeah.
been all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So it's ecosystem, right?
Uh-huh.
So coaga mussels are a filter feeder.
Yeah.
They don't filter silt,
Mm-hmm.
but they filter plankton, algae bloom, stuff like that, right? So they will attach themselves on anything hard that's going to keep themselves in place.
Okay.
And then they're basically a little clam, and it has an in hole and an out hole, if that makes sense. So it's got an in and out, so your water flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then in there, it's got like more or less like strainers, we'll call them. We'll just call them like basically a comb or gills.
Uh-huh.
It's going to strain like a whale can strain plankton, right?
Yeah.
So it basically is a living siphon filter that's pumping water through it. They reproduce at a massive, like ridiculous rate. So coagas will cluster by like asexual reproduction, spawning, same kind of thing. So you're gonna end up with like clusters everywhere, and you're gonna end up with all the high flow areas, all the areas that get a lot of wind.
Okay.
The lakes that are greener,
Yeah.
obviously have more food, so it's
Yeah.
gonna reproduce faster because it's thriving.
Yeah.
San Vicente is really clean, clear, but it all started with when they first filled up the lake. And
Uh-huh.
so there's a lot of coagas in there, and now you see like every year we get a little algae bloom at San Vicente.
Yeah.
It goes green for a while.
Yeah.
That's enough to keep some coagas going.
Uh-huh.
And then you do, based on depth, you will get like other planktons or other small things, microbe stuff that they could feed on. But it may be like a thermocline, just like we see a thermocline,
Yeah.
and you don't fish below the thermocline.
Yeah.
So same thing, like there might be a band of water or a column, not a vertical column, but there might be a stretch or a depth zone that they're thriving in because of the organisms or ecosystem that's there.
Okay.
And so, yeah, now I believe, we've dropped so much,
Uh huh.
and then the water going green and all that kind of stuff. Now the coagas that are there are closer to the surface, and it's
Yeah.
obviously phytoplankton raises because it's absorbing sun. So during the day, water may start out really clear in the morning. As the sun comes up,
Yeah.
you'll notice it's greener,
Yeah.
and that's because they're rising to the surface to absorb
Yeah.
more sunlight.
Right.
And so then the wind comes around and it generates, and it's now it just churns it all up so they could kind of feed.
Yeah.
Like it's good and bad. Like I have the guys that I fish with, being Alex being up north, he's like, oh, now we have the golden mussel.
Yeah.
Dylan in Arizona, he already knows about it. Same thing. Everybody knows about it, but
Yeah.
they're like, oh, and like San Diego. Start talking about the lakes. Start telling them, like, man, that sucks. I'm like, yeah, we're fishing these little lakes that are drinking water. But in reality, the coaga mussels are great for the water district
Because
and
it cleans the
company.
water.
It cleanses the
Because
water,
they don't
so
have to
your
clean it so
your
much.
equipment is now your equipment
Doesn't
costs.
cost them as much.
Correct.
Ha!
What it does cost them is maintenance.
Right, because they have to clean the
They
pipes.
actually have to get into their equipment and clean it out.
Yeah.
And for a while, and I know it's BS, for a while I heard in Havasu, they said they were shutting down one tube. Well, they have four, I believe, 3 or 4
Yeah.
going up the mountain for
Yeah.
the pump station
Yeah.
to go up there. They said they were cleaning one out every day. Cleaning it, like scouring it, because it was so, they said it would get restricted. I'm like, it didn't get closed off in a day.
Right.
They do not reproduce that. So it's scare tactics.
But it's every 4 days.
It's scare. Well, I don't think so. It's not.
Even so, 4 days.
But yeah, they're shutting it down. But it also.
I mean, that's
could
a
be-
calcium. That's a.
Mhm.
Their shell is like.
Mhm. but it's the
hard, it's
clusters.
calcium, it's,
Yeah,
or
and
whatever,
it's
right?
small. So it basically, what it comes
It's gotta
down
build.
to, yes.
It's gotta
So
build
what it
up.
comes down to is, say you have a 5'2",
Yes.
and then over time it shrinks in,
Right.
and they attach to each other. They don't need, after a point, they don't need to be on the bottle. Say,
Yeah.
they'll be on each other out to here,
Yeah.
and so then they break off though, and then they float wherever, and so
Yeah.
then they can, but yeah, like as a water district, the smartest thing, well, what you see is like they never clean tules out either, like Otay, Miramar, right?
Yeah.
Plants, and this is the best way to clean our water naturally
Yeah.
is plants.
Yeah.
They absorb it's just like your plants outside your garden. Nitrogen is a food source. Sunlight is basically, also needed, but that's going to help their water quality. So their equipment, they spend less on carbon, ozones, all these other things.
Right.
And the water's cleaner, so their bottom line, they're not spending as much.
Yeah. I know Jim slightly explained that to me, why they don't like using El Cap water was because it's so dirty.
And in the past, it was
costs them
silt
up.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Silted up.
Like, so in the north end, like back in the day, same thing, like when the water's low and you get a wind, so it rolls, the lake tumbles, and then they call it chocolatey almost, and so it's milky, dirty milky. Well, that's bad. That's like you mud bogging
Yeah.
with an open air filter in your car.
Yeah.
It just gets on. So the Coagas can't handle that.
Oh, okay.
But when the water was up real high, then you don't get the roll effect because the depth of the water wouldn't allow it.
Okay.
And so it didn't have an effect.
Yeah.
But so if you took like a muddy lake, the Coagas wouldn't be good. But like Hodges, when it goes nuclear green, it would clear it up really, like they would explode. They would be on everything.
Yeah.
But then eventually it would clear up. They'd start starving out and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like there's several, as you know, there's several animals that eat Coaga mussels.
Uh-huh.
Blue cats,
Do they?
sunfish,
Yeah.
like red ears, bluegills.
Yeah.
The coots actually eat them now. I see them picking and eating them.
Huh.
I've seen, of all things, I've seen squirrels at El Cap going down on the rocks and chewing them up when the food is scarce, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things so they eat them, and then once they're, I'm sure also, like as a forage, the like crawdads and things like that are going to go through and pick at them. They're not like an impenetrable force. They're not like impossible to open, and they're mostly open. So something
Right.
could get in there and pick at them while their shell's open and feeding.
Yeah.
I know you've caught Coagas on your line, like down the middle.
Uh-huh.
That's because they're sitting there open, and
Right.
eventually your line goes through and finds it. But
Mhm.
it's a good filter. They would just, if they figured a way, and they probably have it, to utilize them in a stretch of water or a stretch of almost like an aqueduct.
Yeah.
You run the water through it as like your pre-filter, we'll say.
Yeah.
So that'll help clear it up, and then you go on to other stuff, chemical, whatever. But it's one of those things that could be a benefit, but they'd have to really design it a little differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, it hurts the food chain though, because it strains out all the plankton,
Right.
things that the shad need, from the bottom of the food chain up.
Right.
And so that's why Coagas are bad for fishing and bad for the ecosystem.
Hmm.
Now zebra mussels, same thing. The water quality for them improved back in the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
But it cleaned up the water, but it also, a lot of that bad water quality was probably due to pollutions,
Mm-hmm.
which is also sometimes, depending on the pollution, is fertilizer for algae, fertilizer for
Right.
gas.
Like
And
there was
balance.
an idea. Somebody came up with an idea of the huge shad
oh yeah,
bloom in
Oh, yeah.
Otay because of the
the
over nutrients in upper Otay from the
I don't-
construction.
well, I don't know about
and
that.
It flooded over.
no, the nutrients really. So our best lakes, and you'll know this. Our best lakes are the healthiest fish, and the lakes where you see the most bait are the ones that get a lot of rain runoff.
Uh-huh.
So Sutherland, El Cap gets massive amounts from the mountains, from the old land by Verona and stuff. When it comes in the back, there's a creek, and so any lake that gets a lot of runoff you wouldn't call it nutrients, you call it runoff.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, the stuff in the dirt has the nutrients that the algae likes,
Right.
which is going to help the algae multiply, which allows food for the shad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guarantee, if you take, I don't know, whatever amount of shad, say you take shad, I don't know if you shock it, you probably can't shock shad safely. So you'd have to like seine it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Take it and throw it into from El Cap to San Vicente, it's gonna die first. It's gonna starve, and it's gonna get eaten because the damn fish could see it. The water's so clear, they'll go pelagic and they'll be like feasting on shad.
Yeah.
So San Vicente, I believe San Vicente, the way to save San Vicente is somehow get watercolor, green, brown, like some color. It can't be gin clear.
Yeah.
And that's gonna allow food base, the planktons, algae for shad,
Uh-huh.
which silversides don't need nearly as much of. They're eating more like planktons, organisms, not necessarily out like phytoplankton is just single cell green algae, so it's like one speck. It's not complex.
Yeah.
But shad feed on algae far more than other things.
Uh-huh.
Silversides are almost more of a scavenger. They can adapt, right? And so that's why you see all the silversides in San Vicente. They could survive there because they just need some wind and some whatever. It stirs things up, brush going up and down, all the water level with the brush. So that the shad lakes, Sutherland, Hodges, Otay, we saw it because of the flooding. It came from the back, like the creek. So rather than upper Otay, because upper Otay is too close of a distance, it's not like it flushed a bunch of stuff out into lower Otay. It all came from the back end, airport, the whole river that runs through there.
Uh-huh.
That's where your nutrients comes in.
Yeah.
And so that's where, all the nutrients that's needed for the forage base.
Uh-huh.
And so the shad exploded. The water being up allowed the bay everything
Right.
to spread. So the bass didn't necessarily chase the shad all around. When the water floods, their instinct was, hey, all this new cover, and so then the bass are in the cover doing whatever, and then it gives a chance for the shad to feed in open water and do their thing. And then throughout the year, obviously what the fish start feeding on, they find each other, and
Right.
then the bass are going ballistic on shad.
Right.
But I've heard a couple people tell me that there's gizzard shad in Otay. I don't know.
Mm.
Gizzard
I
shad
haven't seen
are
any.
another food source, but as you see, they get really big
Yeah.
at Havasu.
Well, we would see them.
You would see them eventually for sure.
Yeah.
Because they're up shallow a lot of the
Yeah,
times,
yeah.
and they move in a way that it's almost unmistakable on the fish finder.
Yeah.
Forward they're like scurrying. It's almost like
Right.
chasing tuna or something like that. They're moving. They will follow your bait a little bit, then go around and stuff. But they're definitely just on the forward graph, live graph, you can see it. But up shallow, you see them. Sometimes they're really slow, poking around, but a lot of times they're skittish.
Yeah.
But when they're full potential, when they're like 18-inch fish, what's going to eat them? The blue cats. We don't need more blue cats in the lakes because 80-pound blue cat is eating 2 and 3 pound bass. He's eating massive amounts of bluegill. So if anything, El Cap would be better also if it had less blue cats, because they're eating a bass population. At certain times the bass population gets kind of rough in there, because I think also a lot of the food gets eaten, or the recruitment will get eaten. But now, like, it's got a lot of bluegills. I think the grass beds come, so now El Cap is kind of becoming a mix, almost like a Otay
Yeah.
or an old San Vicente in my mind.
Old San Vicente.
Because old El Cap did not grow grass
Yeah.
like it did now, or like
Yeah.
it does now.
Yeah.
San Vicente is now Diamond Valley,
Right.
in my mind.
Right. Yeah.
Too steep, too deep.
Yeah.
Ecosystem's not used when it's like that. I mean, it's a bowl.
Uh-huh.
Like, I would say the best lake that you could possibly hope for if you're going to design it would probably have, realistically, like a reservoir would probably still have like 60% of the water be 50 feet or less. In a lot of areas with shallow flats. And for fishing, that's because the grass beds are going to grow. You're going to have shallow cover for the forage. And then the deep water is to help with temperatures, things like that.
I would say Hodges. At
Hodges
that
is
point.
phenomenal.
But
The problem with Hodges I see is Hodges gets so much street runoff because of the development around there. It gets a lot of runoff from the neighborhoods,
Uh-huh.
like urban development, and then the freeways right there.
yeah.
So I think it goes nuclear because of the pollutants.
Yeah.
Not so much runoff. It goes, I think, like that neon green.
Yeah.
Like we've seen it, and that's algae still.
Yeah.
But it's so bad because it's too much nutrients in too short of a time.
Oh, okay.
And then also, if you look at Hodges, how much is vegetation around the lake? Hardly any. There's clusters of tules in different places.
When I was growing up in the 80s, it was like Otay.
Really?
It was solid tules all the way around that thing. That's how I remember it.
It could definitely be like that. I think based on the water level too, it affects like how fast things can grow. Because tules root plant, and then they need hard bottom,
Yeah.
or hard cover to attach to rocks and whatever. But Hodges would improve if they had some diversity and some more vegetation.
Yeah.
Granted, you're not going to get grass when the water is so thick or dirty or brown that the light can't penetrate through to keep it alive.
Right.
But you also have way too many carp in there, and they're gonna eat the grass pretty much as fast as it grows. So you would need like an emergent plant, or you need something that carp wouldn't eat. Or if they really wanted to do like a treatment plant to improve the water quality, they could. It's not drinking water though. They could actually grow plants like water hyacinth. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with water hyacinth?
No.
Water hyacinth is like an aquaponics plant,
Yeah.
but it's a pond plant. Essentially, it's floating. It's big in Asia, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's floating. It roots, float, hang down like a big plant. It might be 12 inches
It's
long.
not.
The
It's
roots.
not what we have in Otai.
We had some in Otai.
Well, what's that stuff in Otai?
There's-
The green stuff. Gator grass or
No,
prim-
okay. So if
primrose?
it's the stuff that's growing up above the water, to where it's like punchable,
Yeah.
you know, that's primrose.
That's primrose.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay, we've also had like Otai appeared with coontail, like coontail or hornwort, which is that
Yeah.
other stuff that's like a strand, and then
Uh-huh.
it's bushy, like
Yeah.
looks like foxtails
Yeah.
or whatever. So that's that, which we didn't have all of all of a sudden it showed up maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, which is another aquatic thing.
Mhm.
But I noticed this year that because it flooded and because it was during the winter, a lot of that primrose died off.
Yeah.
And is like rotting.
Yeah.
And so it'll take time, but as it gets back to the water level where it was, you'll start to see that primrose pop back up.
Yeah.
But that needs to be managed. Otherwise, it's just gonna, like at the delta, the roots are in the wintertime, it doesn't disintegrate. The roots are there, and it's more or less, you could say, dormant. And that's
Uh-huh.
just waiting for warmer conditions, and then they start sprouting leaves. And
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm sure you probably fish Otai more than me. I hate, like, I'll go down to Otai if I have to or whatever. My lake is El Cap. It's so close. I'll fish there. But Otai, for a while, we lost
I don't go down.
coves to primrose.
Well, you did right now.
Bushlow.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, Bushlow's got it.
Bushlow's can it. And
Okay,
then
so there's the one with the bathroom that's floating. That one had primrose,
Yeah.
like probably across 70%. It's gone.
Yeah.
I fished there and I was like, wow, it's all gone.
Yeah.
The back of Harvey,
Yeah.
it was across the whole thing, right? Gone.
Yeah,
So
I know.
what we can only hope is that either we clean some of it out as fishermen, or we hope that something else comes along and gets rid of it, which it won't happen. So over time, it will come back.
Mm-hmm.
Tules, we saw a lot of tules kind of rot out too. Same thing.
So I was. Doesn't the Olympic canoeing rowing clubs have a problem with that primrose? Because
No.
if it breaks off, it goes through the lanes and
Well,
destroys them.
That's
like brick cables.
No, it doesn't. It's not. That's like saying a tumbleweed is going to pull down a massive structure. It's going to get stuck to it. It's not going to rot it. It's not going to break it.
It's not going to break it.
Their lack of maintenance is what is the problem on their lanes that they're complaining about it, because they're using equipment that's still going to rot and rust.
They're not.
They're not maintaining
replacing the cable.
That and the floats.
Yeah.
There are floats that sink
Yeah.
or get knocked off because boats drive over them and they bust off.
Mhm.
But same thing, a plastic float's only going to be last so long, UV resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Their first measure that they put in, the little aerators they call them,
Uh-huh.
it's basically a turbine like turns and it's got a prop underneath
Yeah.
and it pulls water up.
Uh-huh.
When's the last time we saw someone clean the solar panels? Right? Because they're solar driven.
Yeah, they are.
So so how much seagull crop is on there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well
right.
now they're like, that's like their excuse for like, that was their first attempt, like, oh, well, we'll see if we can clean this water up.
Uh-huh.
And Harvey used to be brown. Like Harvey used to be dirty, like chocolate or like El Cap, like back of El Cap. And then years when it would get matted, the mat strains the silt.
Mhm.
So then you have clean water around it, because now it's like basically a big cotton ball that's
Yeah.
straining stuff out.
Yeah.
So depending on the years, all that stuff would change. But now, like, it may mat, you know, in the shallow areas, but I used to see mats that were like 12 foot, 13 foot, like tall,
Yeah.
and they would mat up, like almost like you'd have to drive through it on plane, otherwise you're not trolling through it usually, like in the back of Harvey.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all these things, I mean, I wish we'd have more freedom to where we could help our lakes out. But
Yeah.
like, there's a way to make the lake great for the water department as well as fishing. But you know, we can't even plant bushes. Like, we can't plant habitat because they're worried about it. But yet, look at Lake Jennings. Lake Jennings is
I
private.
don't let anybody know that.
Lake Jennings is private, and they put in some of the dumbest, worst stuff. I mean, Jennings has got its perks for sure, but I mean, there was construction barrier. They put floats that suspend. So, like, what do you do when before you had sonar, you cast and you're chucking and winding.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, bam, you're on a floating habitat. Now you gotta, you know, when they first put them in, the lake was full. You know, some of them would be like 20 feet down, right? So you're not gonna worry about it. But deep crank, trolling trout, whatever. So now you're snagging on that.
Yeah.
You're breaking junk off. Well, there's some that fell off or they sunk, whatever. You know, the water eventually started intruding into what they put in there. That construction barrier and cones deteriorate and fall apart. People snag it and they bring it up. So that was like a poor attempt. That was like one of the worst things I would say you could do, especially if they considered health of the water, because a lot of plastics leach.
Plastic. Yeah.
Chemicals, yeah.
Yeah.
The BPE, all this stuff that
Right.
they're talking to you about, bottles and stuff. So citrus trees or other trees like natural lumber, rock, that's all around. You know, we have it all over and it's clean.
Yeah.
You know, just do it or allow a club to, you know, maybe
brush
have
piles in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
have
sure
a
a club
club.
would love to help out.
Maybe that's what Save Our Lakes can, you know, if we can help improve the habitat, things like that, it would help bolster the population of fish for sure, and the fishing.
God, I wonder what kind of permits that would take.
Well, that's the thing. That was
Oh my
that
God.
was the Tom Lowry and I. We started spitballing on things.
Yeah.
Oh, you need a permit for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Private company can't do it. Oh,
No,
you know, they're going to make
They're
excuses.
getting lawsuits. What if somebody falls?
Yeah.
You know.
But like, you know, the
whatever.
You know, talking about we always bring back the heyday, like back in the 80s and 90s. Like the lakes were, you know. I mean, I remember in the 90s, my friend talking about the lakes in the late 80s being world class, best in the world. Like guys were flying in
From Japan.
all these countries.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was multiple countries.
Yeah.
But it's a massive revenue stream, tourism, everything, because you can't just fly here and land on the water and
No,
stay on the water. You stay in town, you eat,
I
you
know.
drink, you bring your family. They're going to go to SeaWorld or Disney, wherever, right? So it's a big tourism thing.
It is.
And if they're talking about needing people, instead of let's talking about how many homeless there are and things like that, and deterring people from coming, the ways to bring it back, you bring the outdoorsmen, you bring the fishermen. If they bring their families not going to want to be left home. So they say, you want to go to SeaWorld or you want to go to the zoo, all this kind of stuff. He goes fishing, gets to see his family at night. Maybe he does whatever, you know, they go fishing together a little bit. And you're bringing money into the cities in the area.
I know.
But apparently
I know.
you know, the lakes don't want to operate on profit, you know, like whatever reason.
No, it's all buy and sell water. It's all.
Well, yeah, but like, wouldn't it be smart for them to
Cut and dry
to
that way.
maximize the visitors so that you have the money to do the maintenance when you need to?
Yes, you would think
I mean,
that.
I'm not saying like you don't know that. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Common sense should tell you like the more you can collect from people, not necessarily gouge from one person, but the more you can collect means the less out of pocket, or the less you're going to have to, you know, charge people for things. So it just makes too much sense, I guess you would say, for charging people to park, you know, to walk, to use the facilities.
Yeah.
Fishermen use a launch ramp and a parking lot.
Yep.
You know, but like the path, all that kind of stuff at those lakes, we know what lakes we're talking about. And it just, you could reinvest the money to make the lakes better, or you can reinvest it so that, you know, stuff's not breaking on you and then you cry about it and ask for funding and blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of like a California thing, I think, to say it kind of. It's a California thing. Texas, like a lot of other states, they see the resources and they see how valuable they are, and they put a lot of
Well,
money
I think
into it.
I think the whole thing is that we have an ocean and we have a coastline, And so that's
That's
the
their
draw.
Yeah.
And that's what they focus on. They focus on the bay, the port, and they focus on the coastline, the beaches. And that's where Arizona comes in. Arizona comes over to go to the
Yeah.
beach.
Yeah.
They don't come over here to go bass fishing, I think. And Havasu,
But
they only have the river. So they
Yeah.
focus on the river.
Yeah,
and they are very embracing of it. Like
Okay.
they know that that's their cash cow.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
You say Arizona. Okay, so explain to me, and I haven't been, and so I may be wrong in this, but I haven't been to Mojave too much recently. Right?
I know what you're gonna go. I know what you're gonna say. Go ahead.
Arizona side, Nevada side.
Yeah. Yeah.
So habitat like crazy on the Arizona side of Havasu,
yeah.
as well as all around the lake, right?
Yeah.
But Arizona is the company, or not the company, but Arizona is the state that's putting all the effort in. It's not California.
Right.
You can see that because California has no hazard buoys.
They have no
On the
bathrooms.
reefs,
They
and
have
yes.
nothing.
There's a reservation. That's it. There's
it's
private.
so funny.
There's private campgrounds.
Yeah.
There's things like.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody is like I had like Lau was fishing with me and the anglers, and I took him down lake to where he'd probably never been.
Yeah.
Right. And we're fishing. And he's like, oh wow, oh wow. And then he's like looking. He's like, are these campsite? Is there a road that comes out here? I say no. He said this is. He's like, this is lake camp. I said yeah. They have trash cans.
Boating in.
They have
Campground,
boat in.
yeah.
They have a lot of them have, or at least they used to have a tie up for your boat, like you can.
Oh
moor
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The trash cans, the picnic tables. Some of them have little houses nearby. Like they have clusters of them, so that they draw. They want people to beach camp.
Yeah.
At Mojave, you don't have that so much,
Uh-huh.
but they know it happens, so people do beach camp and they allow it for sure.
Yeah.
Like Mojave, but people stake out a beach, put their crap out.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and then they come back, like they try and hold their spot, and then it's like the stretches of Havasu where you see all the party boats and
Yeah.
people camp. But
Uh-huh.
why isn't there habitat in Mojave on the Arizona side, like there is in Havasu? If it's a state.
Well, there is, but not as much. There is around Princess Cove. There's habitats, legit Lake Havasu habitats in Mojave,
A couple of them.
but
Yeah.
not like Havasu has 2,000.
Yeah.
There's probably 200.
No, I was gonna say there's
200.
20,000, but yeah.
20,000,
I think
yeah.
I think a lot of that comes down to Laughlin's right there,
Yeah.
and Bullhead's right there. So that's where their draw is the town, the city,
Uh-huh.
and they know that same thing. Havasu, you have the city up and down a lot of it, right? So there's more people doing things. So I think that around Laughlin, the focus is the casinos,
Right.
the boating, not
Right.
the fishing so much, the
Yeah.
boating aspect of it for sure.
Oh no, yeah. Bullhead or Laughlin is the draw.
But can you imagine?
Not the river, not the lake.
Yeah. Can you imagine like people talk to me about Mojave, like some people criticized it. Oh man, there's the same 5 fish in Mojave and you just take turns catching them, or like how they say the population's so bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not. It's very spotty, and that's because there's no habitat.
So much dead water.
Yeah. But if and natural things have blown in, like rotted trees, brush blows in, someone's easy up blows in from the wind,
Yeah.
and eventually you find the frame because the canvas deteriorates. So there's random things in there for sure, but it's a lot more natural. So the lake fish is completely different than Havasu.
Yeah.
Havasu, most of it's dictated by the habitats in the cove,
Uh-huh.
or on the shelves or leading out to,
Yeah.
But Mojave has tree lines out there for sure.
Yeah.
But I just think same thing. If it was a state thing, why wouldn't it be up and down Mojave on the Arizona side too? Or
Well, it's the Havasu thing.
Yeah.
It's the embracing of the
'Cause
city.
that was
I
done-
think the
that's-
city brings in
that was started a
Arizona
long time ago for sure.
money,
Yeah.
state money to do all
Again, that means your state's not upside down and has
that. Money to spend on it.
it wants to spend the money on that.
But look at Havasu, it's growing because of it.
Well, yeah, remember we were going.
The city is growing.
We were going to dinner.
Yeah, I know.
We were going to
That's
dinner
what
that
I'm
night,
saying.
and you, where are you taking me? And I'm like, oh, we're going up to.
I
the
didn't
house,
know we're not that far.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
So
I guess I do.
if you're on the lake, it's hard to judge. But
Yeah.
when you're on the lake in the bowl and you look up, it damn near reaches like the base of the mountains in some spots.
Right.
And it's like, at that point, they have to rebuild. They have to add more gas stations, more supermarkets,
Uh-huh.
more. That's how everything works in California too. Like the high desert I used to go to Mammoth, and my friend first introduced me to like 25 years ago. You know, we go up to 395.
Yeah.
The first couple of years, out of height, you know, we get on 395, and you go into Adelanto or whatever, and it's a flashing signal. Not even a not even a mandatory four-way stop.
Right.
Like, it was a flashing signal. There used to be like 2 gas stations and like a Burger King, and then literally that was it.
And a
then
strip club.
A strip club and an airport.
I used to have, that was Charlie's. I had a shirt. I'm so proud of that shirt.
My buddy always said, "Oh, you want to go in there?" And I'm
You
like,
gotta,
"No, I'm good."
you gotta check it out.
But yeah, now and then it's like all of a sudden you started, you know, it became cheap enough. Adelanto has the minor league team and then the airport parking lot out there and stuff. But like all that's filled in. Neighborhood land was so cheap and people wanted to buy a house that bad. Neighborhoods, subdivision, all that builds, right? But Havasu is the same thing. It's still cheaper, and so they're still building. Like the land is cheap enough to sell it off. Someone builds a house.
Yeah.
And then, but then you become San Diego, or then you become Los Angeles, or Phoenix. Like Phoenix is ridiculous.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's going to happen. It's
Well,
expansions.
It's always
again.
more and more people.
But we were talking about it. I think we were talking about it at the house too. It's like you don't have to. All these people are talking like anti-dams. You know, everybody wants to pull the dams down so it's natural flowing. Well, what happens when you let the water flow all at once, and you can't control it? It runs out far sooner than you want it to. So the dam is there to manage your water.
Yeah.
So like you know, turn it on and off because
it's not only for flood
flows.
control. It's for, yeah.
But so, yeah, I say, well, there's a lot of canyons, I'm sure, throughout the state that you could make a dam and just back up the water, bottle the water, and then tie it in with a pipeline. So instead of getting all that runoff, I know that some water obviously needs to go downhill into different places, but you're creating a reservoir where you still have more resource. We're building so much in California, up and down the state, that we haven't added more reservoirs.
I know.
Like they said that there's a plan for the only new dam going in is somewhere in the works in Central California or something like that. And I'm like, well,
It's like 20 years old.
yeah, I'm like, it's not happening.
I think. I mean, Diamond Valley is like
That's the new. Well, no, there's supposedly another one. Like
I know
there's
one in Southern Northern California, Central California.
But how many
I forgot
millions
the name
of
Newhall or something?
Yeah, how many millions? You know, safely, how many hundreds of thousands of people move to these areas, and there's no plan for where's the water coming from.
I keep saying the same thing. We're working with dams that are 100 years old or 70 years old, and those were designed for the population.
60, yeah. Oh well, yeah.
At
The
that
capacity
time,
for sure. The capacity
for those
sure.
those. And now they're not using the water from the dams, they're reclaiming it, and they're putting all this money into reclaiming water. But the water has to come from somewhere. So it has to come from the dams initially.
Well, here's the thing, like this is science.
Or from the Colorado River or up north.
So
They're just buying it.
if you take our planet and our atmospheres, so we essentially have the same amount of water
Yeah.
on the planet
Yes.
at all given times.
Yes.
In
We're not
moisture,
shipping it
we'll
to
call
space.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we only have so much.
Yeah.
We're not when it rains, it's not new water.
Right.
It's the moisture coming back from the ground through the atmosphere back down to the ground. So we need to manage it better, and we need to also be able to utilize stuff and still live within an ecosystem to where we don't turn it into like, you know, sky rises and like, you know, like some of these. I remember I was just thinking about there was a movie called Wall-E, I think. This was a cartoon, like an animated movie.
Yeah.
And it was basically the future, and it was something living in this wasteland, and it was like skyscrapers of trash. And then there was this robot that came down, and he was scouring. He was looking for life. And then, you know, he found life, and then all of a sudden he like captured it and shot it back up to space. And the whole movie was basically we abandoned Earth because we ruined it.
Yeah.
We turned it into a wasteland. We made it a horrible thing because we ruined the ecosystem. People become so lazy, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And so their agenda was get people to space, we'll live out here, whatever, and then if the planet ever becomes clean enough or whatever, maybe we'll start re-inhabiting it.
Yeah.
But we don't want it to get to that point. So
Right.
we need same thing though, we can't use toilet to tap water in our lakes. and,
No,
and just keep
because we're-
allowing more people in.
Right.
I mean, you can't shift the population and put everybody on the ends or whatever. I mean, they need to
And
also have water wherever people
to
live.
me, it's all political. Like they needed something to spend their money on to justify the jobs or expenses or whatever. So they like made this, they made it up.
Well, and
Instead of just building a new dam,
Yeah.
or building,
Well,
reinforcing the dams,
yeah.
or do
well, that's like money management.
infrastructure.
They know, like,
Why
the people
didn't they do that 20 years ago?
Yes, the people that built the dams, the engineers, know exactly how long stuff lives.
Yes.
Or the age of the dam, if
Yeah.
you will. And so smart money and people would tell you should be setting money aside, just like your parents say, always set something aside for the rainy day, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Well, if the dam's going to crap out or risks crapping out in 50 years, you should have a plan for building a new one, retrofitting it, and worst case scenario, what if you have one reservoir for drinking water in the whole place? What do you do if you have to drain the water to rebuild the dam?
Yeah.
They can't at that point. They would have to try and build it out so that the lake is not, drained while they're. That's just disastrous.
Right.
I mean, so we really do, like, not just as a state, but as a country, still need to be smart about managing our resources.
Yeah.
I've been saying for decades that we should take water from the Mississippi or some of these other big rivers that flood down and it flushes out to the Gulf or creates massive flooding on the way. If you take a fraction of that water and bring it across via aqueduct, pipeline, all that kind of thing, and pump it in and have it for safety or have it for use, that's great. Because when it goes in the Gulf, it changes the ecosystem in the Gulf temporarily.
Yeah.
And then everything has to rebound. You know that from being an ocean campus.
Yeah.
So, like, we want to still control, same thing, that ecosystem hurts if it gets flooded out or flushes through, and so it takes a while to rebound. So, but when we have all our water, like they did recently, they pump all the water out to the ocean, purely because they want to say we're in a shortage and a drought.
No, that's a conspiracy.
It's not
theory.
really the lakes.
Is that why they did that?
When they do
we'll
it to
never
all
know.
lakes,
We'll never know.
When they do it to all lakes, it seems like it's or like not all, but several. Like Hodges was really full. They blew it out. Otay, lower Otay was
The
really
state
full.
said the dams are in bad shape, so
That's
they had to lower the water level
mismanagement.
for. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Barrett, several years ago, Barrett was at the verge of drying up.
Yeah.
So is Marina. Like they both.
I have video of.
Then all of a sudden, Barrett is full now.
Yeah.
So they're woohoo! We have a ton of free water now. So
Yeah.
they've been pulling. I know they're going to be pulling water out of Barrett to bring it down.
Yeah.
Sweetwater is brimming full all the time now.
Because
that's the
because of
middleman.
Loveland, they're draining Loveland third time.
I know.
They're going to drain it again.
I heard,
They have already told us that they're going to do this.
and I've heard it was because of equipment.
There's a
faulty
sand
valve.
mine. that
Well,
they're-
no. So apparently there's a valve.
Oh,
This is what I heard.
right,
There's a
right,
valve
right,
that
right.
controls the water shut off and on, and it literally is not able to close all the way anymore, so it leaks. And so when they send out water, they can't completely close it, so they're wasting some water. So they say I'd rather lower it all at once or use it and deal with it than fix the valve or buy.
Well, that's what's wrong with Morena. Morena leaks. Have you ever been down there to
All
see
of
it?
them leak, I'm sure.
There's
The dam or pipe? Like
no, the
pipe?
dam. The dam leaks at the base of Morena. Okay, so have you ever heard this story? There used to be
think so.
trout that lived from Morena to Barrett.
Well,
There's
I've noticed
brown trout.
several places that talk. Yeah, they have had
It's,
trout. in
it's a
Southern
Cottonwood
California.
Creek, but it's Hauser Canyon, and there used to be
A strain or
population of
yeah.
trout
Yeah.
because of Morena had a leaky dam, and it's at the base, and you can hike down there and see it. I've seen it. I've done it
But
twice.
under high water, obviously, there's more
So the-
pressure on
exactly.
it. It leaks faster.
Exactly. Yep.
Mhm.
It was all during those high water years when it was full that there was always flow coming out of
And I
Morena.
remember-
They could never stop it.
When I was looking for a house, I would remember looking in Campo a little bit
Uh-huh.
because there was land, it was cheap. They opened it up. The developers were building neighborhoods, and then we're like, it's just not quite a right fit for us. But then they talked about draining Marina completely.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that city is like, well, like it's groundwater. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not the reservoir.
Yeah.
It's groundwater. So
Yeah.
now you're going to drain the lake, and then you're going to dry that up, and then what happens to the city?
Yep.
Where you going to tell people to buy water, bottle, truck it in
Mhm.
to your house?
Yeah, their wells ran
I
dry.
mean, that's horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the kind of poor thing. But same thing at Marina. Say they built 5,000 homes. I don't know how many they built, maybe 1,000. But there's neighborhoods like, and it was like, okay, so now your demand for the resource just went up by
Mhm.
double. We'll
Mhm.
call it double.
Mhm.
Where'd the resource come from? When we have scarce, it's all rainwater. That's it. So
Yeah.
if we have droughts or bad rain here, there's nothing to give them, and so they're going to have to use the lake water somewhere.
Right. Right.
I don't know. Everybody I talk to, at the tournaments, though, they're always like, "Oh, where are you from?" And this. Now we start talking, and then they ask, "Oh, yeah." Well, some of them are like, "Oh, so do you fish San Vicente and you fish El Cap?" Like they know the lakes because they probably see stats or good things come
Uh-huh.
from them, and then but they don't realize how small they are.
Right.
Like you tell a guy, and he's like,
3,000
"Well,
acres.
they're like, "How big is it?" I'm like, "Well," and that's where like the acreage. I know like Murray and Jennings are very small. The big ones, I'm like, "Well, it depends on how full it is." Like El Cap is, because
Yeah.
there's a big difference from 20 feet of water because it goes back so far on the
Yeah.
north end.
Yeah.
But they're like, I say, so you take off at the launch ramp. I'm like, El Cap, maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, that's it. And they're like, oh my God. And they can't imagine. They're blown away because they have all these big reservoirs and stuff like that. But yet we're producing a lot of good fish,
Yeah.
at times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tell them our lakes are so small, and I say they're drinking water. And then you start telling them, oh, we got to pay this much money to launch. We got to do this. They tell you what days you could use them. They kick you off at sunset. All this stuff, and they're like, oh my God. They're like horrible. They're like Southern California, or
Right.
if they're from out of California, California in general is bad.
It's just not.
If they're from Northern or
We're just
Central
used to
California, they're like, oh, you guys, that sucks. That's horrible. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, I have a lake 15 minutes from my house, but I can only use it on this day or that day, and it costs me this much money at a time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's where we're lucky, but we're pushed to the max for sure.
Yeah. Right.
Can you imagine the cities without lakes accessing or allowing fishermen, people to go on there? If it's all drinking water, like what's going to happen to the industry? You work at a tackle shop. There's several tackle shops.
Oh.
Like if the lakes become unusable, launchable. So I was talking to one of the guys in the tournament. I was like, yeah, they're going to close our best lake down, draw below the ramp, blah, blah, or below the ramp, so it's not usable.
Mhm.
It'll be shoreline. I'm like, who knows if they're actually going to rebuild the dam? It might take 20 years.
Yeah.
Whatever. Who knows?
Yeah.
And so I said, so yeah, I'm like, and he's like, oh man, that would suck. And I said, yeah, I'm like, for our economy, I said, there's a lot of business, tackle shops,
Mhm.
boat dealers.
Mhm.
I'm like, all these people like here, flock to the few lakes there are, maybe, but like where we are, we have people that use them on a weekly basis. I know I try and use lakes on a weekly basis. I do not have the time to go to a lake 3 hours or 4 hours away, or the river.
Right.
You're not going to turn and burn.
No.
I mean, I was when I was younger. Like I've done the let's go to Yuma and fish all day, turn around and come back.
Yeah.
I've done the Castaic and done it, fished in the summertime. You get up at 3 in the morning, get home at 11. You can do that, but you can't do that every day. And obviously that's only for certain people. Like most people can't handle that.
Yeah.
And won't do that.
Yeah.
So like we need lakes for a lot of reasons. For
Mhm.
people, for the economy. We need to come up with something. And I'm hoping that our leader, our lobbyist, she's going to kick some butt.
I hope so. She seems pretty on top of it. I mean, she's getting paid.
Yeah.
A lot of people contributed money, so that was a good thing. We'll see.
Well, and I think
As long as we get results
Yeah.
initially, then I think
I think they could restructure the way things are done and written. Obviously, things are grandfathered in a lot of the time. California is horrible, and sometimes the U.S. in general is bad about not going back and revisiting laws or protection acts and
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, well, what was needed back in the 70s maybe now is not needed, like sea lions. Sea lion population Hello, that's a big problem, right?
Yeah.
Sea lions, at the Delta, people talk about the stripers being
God.
so bad, right? Sea lions are destroying the Delta just as much, I would say, almost as
I feel so sorry for those
the grass
guys.
spraying.
Yeah.
They spray the grass so that the water looks all great and this and that too.
Right.
But for the boaters, the wakeboarders, and to live around it, now the neighborhoods that they're building up, some of them aren't that great, but there's actually big, nice neighborhoods they're building to be waterfront, and they nuke the water in those areas so that it looks all beautiful and nice and it's not all grassy.
Yeah.
But again, the grass is an ecosystem, it's going to be there.
Yeah.
If you remove all the grass, you change the ecosystem for the worse. But sea lions, like if you look at the numbers, the population now is 100-fold or 10, like ridiculous amount over. They do not need the same protection that they did back then.
Right.
And they are actually like overpopulated to where they're starving. Their conditions are bad. Look, you see them. They're up on the wharfs. They're up on the docks. The smell, everything, the bait dock, all that. So they're living in almost like homeless condition, like slum, like very bad conditions, right?
Yeah.
So there's too many and too small of an area, lack of food. They get lazy. They start hunting in the Delta. They're hunting in fresh water.
Yeah.
And the stat was, I heard that they could eat 80 pounds of fish a day.
Yeah.
I don't know that they do every day.
Yeah. I mean,
But sea lions are gluttons. We know that.
Yeah.
You get a bull sea lion out on the boat, and he would patrol the boat, and he would either eat all the bait to where you're, nose hooking, your bait comes back and it's just the head and your hook, whatever, or they cherry pick your yellowtail, your barracuda, all that. And it got to the point where they never used to eat rockfish, right?
Yeah.
This was decades.
That was
this was a long time ago. You're like,
that
wow,
was
they
a big
don't eat
deal
the
when
floaters.
they started eating rockfish.
Then they're hurting. They're like, wow, I need to make it part of my meal because they needed it.
Yeah.
They looked at it as another food source. So
Right.
they are, changing. So they eat lobsters.
Mm.
I'm sure you've been lobster fishing.
No. I mean, I
Hoop
guess
net?
I have. Yeah.
Well, so and I'm not a big lobster eater, but I have friends, customers that do it, and so I've been on the boat and we hoop net, and then I've seen the sea lions come up at night, and they circle the boat and they're waiting for you to throw the shorts
back.
or the bycatch, and they're eating lobsters.
Yeah.
And I mean that's smart. You could say that the animal's smart, but we don't need to protect them as strongly. And
No,
strictly
you
as
don't
we
need to go to jail.
Well, yeah. I mean, now you could use
I mean-
salt pellet, or you could use some rubber stuff or whatever to try and deter them.
Non-lethal deterrent.
But the Delta, I mean, San Francisco, you go to the waterfront and you smell the sea lions, and you're trying to get someone to dine at a restaurant that's on the waterfront. Maybe it's $100 a person for your meal, and they have the glass panes open and the wind coming in, and it smells like a sewage plant
Yeah.
because it's sea lions.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they should think like, hey, maybe we don't need to protect the sea lions quite so much. Maybe we need to prevent them from getting on our docks and this and that.
Yeah.
And then they have to survive, and there's going to be populations going up and down, just like anything else.
They're not going away at this point,
They're not.
They're not like at one point in time, they were threatened.
Yep.
And
70s.
I understand that. And it was a great success that they came back. But now
Overprotection.
they're overprotected.
And the same as in, like,
Totally.
my father lived in Yellowstone. They brought the wolf back.
Yeah.
Well, and he lived there long enough to, not in Yellowstone, but he lived right there outside of the park by an hour and a half. But they bring the wolf back, and there used to be massive herds of all the animals, right? And then now you protect the wolf, or you don't think of it, you put them out there, and then they start reproducing. Next thing you know, now you have all these wolves that are hunting, not just livestock, which is what you hear about more. They're hunting the herds of animals that are protected in the park as well, or that are more or less only found in the park, like the bison. And you get a lot of elk, you get a lot of deer, and so now the wolves are almost like the same deal. They're overrunning, and they're starting to have ranchers and stuff, and you could pick them off if they're creating a problem or harming your livestock. But there's no clause in there that says we need to check the population and maintain it or do whatever. They just blanket it and say we're good. So for us, like, same thing. Like, if they start doing things, they need to produce a law that has like a time frame or needs to say like we need to be able to revisit this. Maybe it's a temporary protection, like they do the MLPA, you know, where you got a closure. Well, we're going to close here now. We're going to close here next. Or all of a sudden our populations are great. We don't need to close. So do it. Variable limits, whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
We need to manage it, realizing that it's going to be ups and downs.
Right.
So I don't know. We got off track.
Man, we're so far in the weeds.
We're like.
We're talking about Havasu.
We're talking, you know, we went from one tournament to a whole other state affair. Well, you're going
yeah.
That's a good one.
I've never had one go this long before. It's going to be interesting to see how it downloads and whatnot.
Let's say you're going to break it up.
It might have to.
You're going to chop a lot out.
It's going to be like 2 parts.
I was going to say, hopefully it wasn't so boring that you cut it all out and you just throw a couple.
Well, I know the first part was great.
Oh, well now, all right, sorry. We'll go back to fishing. Go back to fishing.
Once we got away from the, what would
a co-angler bring?
What lure would you use to catch 5 fish on?
Okay, so what's your go-to?
You know, that's funny. Nobody's ever asked me, and I've thought about it a lot. I don't know.
And I see you around. I see you a lot, right? So you said you just met me at Havasu. The truth is, I mean, we've seen each other forever, but we've really never talked. We've talked in the tackle shop for a couple minutes about this or that. But yeah, it's like, so it is new.
No, I met you at Anglers Marine, and when I first bought the bass boat, I would go in there, and you knew my name. You were one of the first people that, in this clique of community that knew who I was. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's really nice, because I can go into John's shop, nothing against John, and he still doesn't know who I am. But I'm like, dude, I've been in this business for 30 years.
Well, that, and I'm like, yeah, and to me, same thing. I was working retail a lot, and so I know customer service.
Right.
I was at the shop, and I would get people that would call on the phone and ask questions, and they would be like, well, do you know who? And I would tell them, and say, well, do you still have this or that? Yeah, I do. How do you know? And I'm like, well, I know who this is. Well, how do you know who this is? I recognize your voice.
Yeah.
I talk to you enough. Blah blah blah. You know. So
okay. So anyway, you know. So okay. So what do I do? What are you going to tell me? I'm afraid to hear this. But go ahead.
No, what's your go-to?
Oh, I would probably, if I had to fish something to catch a fish, drop shot or an eco worm.
Wait. Let me give you a twist. Okay. So we're gonna do more confined here. We're gonna give you El Cap in June. June is usually spawn, but it could be good. But it gets kind of hot.
It's so funny you say that, because
I know it's coming up.
You know what I do? You know what I do in El Cap in June, and that's it. Is throw a buzzbait, and I just that's what I do.
Regardless of grass, regardless of anything.
Yeah, we go down the bank, we throw a buzzbait, and I look for bait.
Tournament, fun fishing.
No. Oh. During a tournament. So fun fishing. If I'm going to go out there and go fishing at El Cap in June, I am going to have a buzzbait tied on and probably fish that until I don't get a bite. As long as I don't get once I don't get a bite, then I'll probably come home.
I was gonna say, oh really? I was gonna say 4 rods. We can't even get to 4 rods if you say I'm coming home.
But see, that's very specific.
Yeah.
And it's only because it's happened. I know what's going to happen this year because of the low water, and it's probably going to just be like freaking nuts.
It could be for sure.
Well, the last time it was low water like this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's not just the water. Like I noticed, like there's times where obviously a shad spawn or something would be good for a buzzbait or maybe shallow. But like I noticed if you put grass on the lake, that's even better. You know, on the shorelines and stuff. So having good grass beds for sure, it gives a place for fish to hunt.
Yeah.
And then the food, we went to we talked about food, so it gives them a place to find their forage. And then shade after the sun comes up, so it's like the perfect. So I usually break out the buzzbait more if it's got grass.
Yeah.
So if there's no grass, or sometimes like I don't know, I will feel out topwater a lot. Like at times, like I said, I'm reaction, or I like to fish fast or have fun when I'm fishing. I don't run to the lake and pick up a worm. Let me tell you that. If I do, it's because it's
because it's tough though.
Yeah.
And if it's not a buzzbait, then it would be a chatterbait.
Yeah. So you're like me. You like to run and gun and fish fun things. There
I
are
would
people
like
that,
to.
there are people that
I'd like to
go
be the cool guy.
Well, there are people that they're go-to. Like I know guys, like, and I first learned a little bit more about boat fishing and tournament fishing from a guy that had all the bells and whistles, had all the stuff. But when it came down to it, I would practice with him a little bit in his club, or for his club tournaments, I would jump on his boat and stuff. And he would have a tournament, and after me pre-fishing with him or whatever, and I'm catching him on spinner, bait, rattle trap, a jig, a worm. I'm like, oh yeah, he tells me how he did. I'm like, oh yeah, how was it? And he's like, oh, I got this place. I'm like, what'd you do? Drop shot.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the drop shot was the go-to. The drop shot was his go-to because he could just drag it, float around, you know.
Yeah.
It's great at certain times, but there were times where I practiced with him and I outfished him, you know, plenty, because the fish wanted something faster.
So the guy that won, took 5th place at Havasu, Brandon Keel.
Okay. I heard the
this
name.
last
You guys
week.
were talking about, like, trying to figure out
Okay,
who he was.
He's a good friend of mine.
Okay.
And he came up with this, and he's the one that really pushed me into the whole reaction thing.
Okay.
Like, I was a worm, die-in-the-wool worm guy. That's what I fished. That's all I fished. And he was like, you fish that Nico worm, you fish that drop shot, you're fishing for 7th place. In the club. In the club, you're fishing for 7th place. That's where you are fishing for.
Yeah.
If you want to be first,
I would say
then
for
you
sure a
have
lot of
to-
times a year I would say that.
then
Yeah.
you have to throw reaction. You have to fish for bigger ones.
Or mix
that's-
it up at least for sure.
Yeah,
It needs
whether
to
it's a
be part of
jig
it.
or a 10-inch worm
Yeah.
or whatever.
It
But you
doesn't take a
have
big
to,
bait.
you
but
have
yeah, I
to
believe
fish
that.
for bigger fish. Well, jig's not big,
No.
but you have to step away from the worm. Now,
Mhm.
if you're going out, if they're not biting,
Oh yeah, then you got you got to break out whatever you have to get bit. Get a
well,
keeper.
that's what the question was.
But
But initially, in June,
Just fun
I would
fishing,
go out
yeah.
there and start with a buzzbait, and then go to
Yeah.
a chatterbait, and then
so
like
do
you
the same
said, you
thing.
graduate down
Yeah, you slow down until you
and slow down.
collide.
But
with
if
the
I have
fish.
to slow down to a drop shot, I'm probably not going to fish.
I usually choose a
unless I
lake
have
that I
a
don't have to
guide.
do a drop shot.
Unless I have to figure out
Yeah.
what is going on.
Yeah, and sometimes too
Because
I'll
I
go out
live
there.
10 minutes away.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
Yeah. Or I'll go, or yeah, if you're retired and the lake's open 5 days a week, you can choose your days
Yeah.
for conditions and then
Yeah.
say, well, the conditions are better, I'll go on Friday.
Right.
Or I'll go on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find a lot of time I'll go out there and I'll either go out half a day,
Mhm.
maybe I'll pick the afternoon. A lot of times I like the afternoon to the evening.
Yeah.
But
I know
it's
there's
not
like
necessarily
two different.
great.
There's 2 different sets of guys
Yeah.
out there. Like me, Bob Palacheski. There's a handful of us that are there in the mornings,
Mhm.
and then when I'm leaving, I see like Jake showing up and Jackson, or
Well,
like
And sometimes
these other
for me,
guys.
yeah, I have work to do
Right.
or whatever, so
Yeah.
I'll have half
Yeah.
a day of work that day, and then I'll go to the lake. But like, if it's a pure fun thing, and I know, like, I have the whole day off, but I know that it's slow in the morning and the afternoon is the key, or it's fall and the wind is not bad, but the warmer weather is in the
Uh-huh.
afternoon, then
Yeah.
the fish move up and
Yeah.
they feel a little bit. I may show up and I'll go to the lake at noon or 1,
Mhm.
just kind of see how it is, and then start fishing a little slow until I find the fish or how reactive they are, and I'll may sit there and live and die by a crank or a paddle tail swim bait or something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, you gotta have fun fishing for sure.
Yeah.
And I have a friend that like used to have a membership to Vail Lake, and he would anchor up and throw bait or throw craws or throw whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, all day, man. You know, he'll be there like all day,
Yeah.
and you crush him. But I'm like, I'm bored. He's on the same spot and he's pulling it. Say they're 2-pounders. I cannot stand live bait to sit there and do that. That's not fishing. That's catching, but you're waiting for the fish to dunk. You're not
Mhm.
fooling them, you know, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. You're not fooling them. I'd rather the challenge, trick them, whatever, you know.
Sure,
Think
right.
that I'm doing
Yes.
something to
Yes.
to gauge the fish. But
Yeah.
it's more engaging too. You know, to work baits and to use stuff to move around, to angle, well, you know, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
To me, like, fishing has to be fun. But I fish a lot, not everything. Saltwater boat, I go to the river or Mojave. I like big striper fishing.
Yeah.
That's almost like saltwater fishing to me.
Yeah.
That's like catching yellowtail.
Yeah.
You know, a big fish like that. I used to, when I was a little kid and growing up, Santee Lakes, carp. Carp were awesome for the transition, because it was Santee Lakes, the transition between good bass fishing and trout season.
You know what's fun is to catch carp on a fly rod.
I haven't done a fly rod, and they didn't, like up there, they didn't used to, and granted back then, like, I didn't know about, like, as much about all the different streamers and patterns you could tie.
Yeah.
But we would do carp on ultralights.
Yeah.
And so it would
Yeah.
be, and we're on budgets, you know, kids. We're like, okay, well, let's catch them on as light as stuff as possible.
Yeah.
And so if the lakes had grass, we would maybe fish 4 pound.
Uh-huh.
If the lakes had no grass and it was cool, we'd fish 2 pound.
Yeah.
And then the thing was like, who's got the smallest pool? So then it's like you're fishing with 5-foot ultralight. Then like all of a sudden, one time someone shows up with a 4-foot ultralight.
Yeah, Ken
Or it
Cord.
gets smaller. Yeah, I mean, I got down to, we would go down to like a 3-foot ice rod
Yeah.
and a little 500 size reel.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that the fish didn't spool you
Yeah.
and take all your line and snap you off, because then you're done for the day, you know. But like that was the challenge. And then, you know, you're sitting there. It teaches you a lot too for finesse fishing,
Mhm.
like how to manage the pressure
Yeah.
and what you could
Yeah.
do. Because, you know, you bring I brought in 20-pound fish on 2-pound line.
Uh-huh.
It might take you 10 minutes. It might take you 5. It depends on what you can give and take, but it does help you fishing for bass. And
Yeah.
other species, trout. I still trout fish in the Sierras, and I still do it. I don't do it bait. I don't do it, you know, power bait and stuff, but
Right.
same thing. You're sniping them or you're picking them off,
Yeah.
like in the stream targets. And that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
stuff, so.
Yeah. I love trout fishing. I used to do it a lot. That's
Well, I know you did the pyramid thing, and
Yeah.
that's one of my bucket list, or like one of my things that I haven't done yet. But
yeah.
I'm probably.
Oh, you should go.
I want
you
to
should do
go,
it.
but my center console is also my plan. Like, say I'm going to tow it up there, and
Uh-huh.
if I get on the water, I'll troll or I'll cast.
Yeah.
I know the whole thing, a lot of shoreline,
Yeah.
a lot of flies and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But to me, if I go up there, if I know that I can catch them trolling different depths, whatever,
Mhm.
I'll still catch them trolling.
Mhm.
I'll still follow the rules by whatever, you know.
Oh, there's
but-
guys that troll up there full speed.
But
they're
that's,
guides.
That's
They're
the thing is
guide
like, yeah, I
business.
mean, like, and you know, big predatory, you know, trout are predatory. They're gonna
Mhm.
eat small stuff. So
Yeah.
I guarantee you, the swim bait,
They got
the
tui chums.
Impala, yeah.
No,
They
they
have a lot
eat. I think I had a 9-pounder puke up a 13-inch tui chum. I scooped it up.
Yeah.
He puked it up next to the ladder. I
Yeah.
scooped it up and measured it. It was 13 inches.
Well, and I
That was
know,
a 9-pound fish.
and I know, like in the Sierras too, like Jerry Rago. You know,
Yeah.
He made a lot of good headlines trolling, leg core trolling in the Sierras
Mhm.
for big brown trout.
Yeah.
And that's an even better way to catch them. For me, if I can catch them doing something like on a reaction bait, then it's better than going in the creek and the spawn and, you know,
Mhm.
kind of getting, that's like bed fishing for
Oh, I know.
bass.
They're totally.
But,
They're against the brown baggers.
yeah, I mean, I've done it in streams like below Flaming Gorge. I got a little bit into the jerk bait and catching some better trout and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Arkansas, the White River, like
Mhm.
that stuff, phenomenal. The guys, I follow probably a half dozen guys that are fishing those waters for those Magnum brown trout. So
You hear, is it Cody Spetz moved back there?
yeah,
And
yeah.
he's making more money.
He was a tournament guy. I mean, he's cool.
He's great.
But it's smart. In my mind, it's smart money. I mean,
He's-
it's not the same lifestyle. It's not chasing your tournament dream. But if you're looking at
It's not
making
even
money,
brown trout. He's
It's
just
just
guiding trout
yeah.
on Taneycomo. And he says, I'm making more money doing that
Yeah.
than anything.
And he might then at that point he might take the money
And that's
still
what I
use
heard.
it for
I
your,
don't quote me on
well,
that. You know.
you use it. You could still use that revenue for your tournaments if you
Sure.
want.
Oh yeah,
It puts the heat off of you for, you know, say you don't have a good tournament, you don't cash a check,
Mhm.
you don't have sponsors to cover that, then all of a sudden, yeah, it's coming out of your bank account.
I just
So-
think it's kind of funny that there's a population of people back there in Missouri and Arkansas that got
oh, it's
that,
big
that will
serious,
take
yeah.
a guide out to catch trout, rainbow trout. Not even 30-inch brown trout, but you
Yeah,
know.
you go out further too, like, you know, further east, and trout is a big thing.
Oh yeah, Tennessee and Smoky Mountains,
So,
Georgia.
well, that, yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say Georgia and stuff
Yeah.
like that, yeah. But you can't not. I mean, they're still enjoying the outdoors. We still need fishermen for sure.
Oh, I'm not against it.
I would say the only funny places are like the Santa Ana River Lakes. You know,
That's
like that type of an environment. That's not really fishing, is it? That's
so bad.
Most of the guys aren't really fishing. They're lounging. That's like going to the beach. Like you go to Hawaii. The last thing I'm going to do is go to Hawaii and sit on a lounge chair on the beach.
So you know what we would do? We would go to Dixon and Wolford and fish trout fish with our fly rods, with indicators and midges and whatever, and have a really good time. It was good, but then they stopped letting us release them.
Oh yeah.
And
that's going to die.
one guy finally got in trouble.
That's going to die. Yeah.
And then that's going to die, even though we don't even put him in the net.
We have forceps and
special release sticks. They're round, and they're midges, you know.
Yeah,
and
pokes the hook out.
and barbless, and they're nope, you can't release them. So we stopped doing it. You know, it's not worth going in there and only catching 5.
Mm-hmm.
You rent a boat, you take
Because it
your
could be
stuff
quick
up there.
too. It could also be quick. I mean, on those trout, you know.
Oh, it's good. I mean, you're gonna go and catch 20.
Yeah, I was gonna say they could be circling in a pocket.
Yes.
And it's like the replenishing resource. So it's like, hey, I don't have to move the boat once I found one.
No, yeah.
And they're
that was the deal.
Suckers are kind of dumb, so they patrol, and so you could pick them off. You may have to change your flies or.
It was really good practice for Crowley. Is how everybody looked at it. Like Crowley is like that's where that's the pros and whatever. I mean, that's where you go and there's tournaments up there doing that same thing. And you're fishing for wild fish.
Yeah,
not
totally different.
Not native fish, but wild fish where they plant them.
Yeah,
small and
living,
they grow.
Yeah, it's living for a couple years in the water.
Yeah.
And I have family in Colorado, and same thing. Go there as a kid in the summer, and my family lives in Estes Park, which is right there.
I saw your hat. I was going to say something. I forgot to mention it.
Right there on the corner of Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah.
And so we would go there though, and they have a lake in town that's
for kids.
Just lake.
Okay.
So there's a reservoir, and it has a stream flowing through town, which is pretty awesome. That it flows through town, and they have sidewalks, and they allow you to fish it.
Yeah.
So you can fish through there, and then it goes through town into a golf course all of a sudden. Well, that's where you get a little iffy because you have people golfing.
Yeah.
But the one end of the lake has a shoreline access on the lake and like the river mouth, and it goes out into the lake. Because we didn't have a boat. This is like I get dropped off, same thing. I would fish with my cousin and whatever, we'd fish. And so then we start wandering up the creek, get to the golf course, and there's one spot where there was a hole, like a green, that was right there on the stream where we'd fish. And I'd start with spinning rod and stuff, but I started teaching myself. I taught myself to fly fish, and it's the same thing to try and catch the bigger, smarter fish.
Yeah.
But so we'd go there and we'd fish and we'd collect golf balls in the stream from the guys, and so then we'd be fishing, and if they would be, hey, kids gotta move, whatever, we'd move and whatever, and then they'd come to play their shot.
Yeah.
And we'd say, hey, we collected some golf balls. Do you guys use these for anything? Are they any good anymore? And so they would, like, if they played often enough, or they were playing several holes and we were going to be maybe potentially in their way, they would be okay with it. Like, they'd kind of recognize, because I'd be there every day, maybe for a week or 2 weeks. And so it's different. I mean, that community though is totally open. It's tourism. It's nice.
Yeah. Right.
But they'd have the river, the lake. They planted tiger muskie there. That was a fish I was like, never had the opportunity for, and I was like, man, I wish I would have caught something.
Yeah, I'd like to catch one of those.
And I recently went to Flagstaff and we went pike fishing.
Yeah.
There's some pike in there. They're hated, catch and kill now.
Yeah.
But it's a great game fish.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, they're aggressive, so it's like bass fishing.
Utah has good tiger muskie. It's in Pineview Reservoir.
New Mexico has some too.
Yeah.
Like I kind of keep my tabs on a lot of stuff. I'd fish a lot of things, as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no bad thing. I believe that fishing, the more species you fish and techniques you do in those fishing, adventures or experiences, it's gonna help you at some point with bass fishing.
Oh yeah.
With your primary species.
Yeah. I'm
like the delta or
totally
current. People in they fish areas that have water flow, and they're fishing and they don't realize that like when there's current, the bass are still lazy. They'll get into eddies and sit on things that are not moving so much. And so you fish them almost like a trout, or you fish them like a striper, because striper are the same way. Like schoolie stripers, dropping your bait on the bottom is not fishing to me. Same thing. I'm going to throw a reaction or some kind of a top water, swim bait, whatever. And so same thing, I do that when I go to Mojave. I'm fishing current breaks, structure, shade lines.
So there's quite a bit of current up there at Willow Beach.
Yeah, usually, and they do it based on water generation. So like some days you're out there and it's flowing. It may only flow a couple miles an hour.
Yeah.
But then there's times at night it cuts off and it'll get grease flat, and then the water just stands and the grass stands. When it's like that, it's actually a little tougher because
I would think so.
the fish roam.
Yeah.
You put current on
current
it, and it's like now all of a
concentrates
sudden, now all of a sudden the fish wants to be lazy, and
It's the same thing in
That's
saltwater
where-
fishing.
yeah.
Especially stripers.
Tides.
Stripers are more open
Yeah.
water oriented, but like yellowtail and whatever, if you don't have any current, you're not going to catch anything.
Tougher.
It's
Tide
and-
change, the tuna, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see a lot of fish,
Yeah, they position themselves on a rock. They always position themselves feeding into the current. So you set above the rock, you anchor above the rock, and your lines are going back to it.
Okay, so here's a question for you, bass fishing, before we keep going forever too, but like,
Yeah.
what do you do in the wind on a lake?
So
Do you cast into the wind and work your bait?
so
Face, like say if the fish was...
well, I would, yeah. Sometimes I do, and I try to. I
mean, obviously
I go
it depends if
back
you're
and
shallow
I
or
go
deep.
back and forth.
Yeah.
Because I haven't figured it out.
No?
Yeah, bass will face. All fish face into the current. They're all going to face into the current. They're not just going to swim around. They're going to face
Well, yeah,
into
they're
it.
hydrodynamic, just
Yeah.
like aerodynamics.
Right. So
They
that'll-
can't paddle,
that'll
paddling
bring-
backwards doesn't do so well.
That'll bring food to them.
Correct, correct.
So there's times that I'll cast into the wind, and then there's times that I'll fish downwind, and it depends on what I'm fishing. A lot of times,
Well, and
if
how
I'm fishing
strong
a
the
thin
wind is
Cinco,
too.
you got to fish downwind.
How strong the current is too, or like the wind is basically. Because if it's barely blowing, like if I'm going down, like say it's breezy, and it's like it's pushing you too fast, then all of a sudden, like especially if you're casting reaction, I don't want to be casting and then winding so much slack up essentially that I'm floating so fast. So if I'm casting the crankbaits or whatever, I am also wanting to bring my bait from their face to them, ahead of them to them. And if you go downwind, if you think about it, especially if it's shallow, where the current's more affecting, then you come up behind them.
I don't like fishing downwind.
You're sneaking.
I try to cast
you're
into the
sneaking,
wind.
Yeah, you're sneaking up to them, and then you're gonna get more. Sometimes you get more of a defensive bite or reaction, and they
Yeah.
don't eat it so well a lot of times. But it depends on depth and stuff that you're fishing too. But and I've seen El Cap. I've been on El Cap where it's shallow and it's windy, and I've seen the wind blowing at your back. You're anchored, wind blowing at your back. You cast the bait back. That's not heavy, and it actually pulls under the boat.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Because the water can only go so far, and so essentially it's like a conveyor belt. Goes there, and then you get an undertow,
That's interesting.
and so it'll suck back up.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people don't associate that, but also your turnover, you call it turnover, water turns over. So it's the same thing. Like say you have your surface temperature, windy day, the water gets pushed across the surface. Well, that water has to go somewhere. So it's essentially pushing water and then forcing water under
Yeah.
to replenish.
Yeah.
And then some people too don't realize, like on a windy day, we were in Clear Lake in a tournament a couple years ago. Wind was horrible from that should be northwest, blowing down lake and everything, right? So in the creek, where it drains out, Cache was at a point where people, like we were in there push pulling. We were barely moving, with the engine, and then we'd have to get out and we'd push pull through some spots because the water was so low. And I was fishing with a guy with an aluminum boat that he borrowed. And so he was like, man, you're a giant, you're a big dude and whatever, we're gonna have to push pull. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. So we were going through some stuff that was super skinny and push pulling. And it was on the windy day, really windy day. And I was like, wow, I'm like, it's stacking water. He's like, what's stacking water? I'm like, this side of the lake is probably, if you look at the elevation and did a test, it's probably higher on this end of the lake. It's not sitting flat. It's
Yeah.
actually fill it like this end is artificially got a tide almost. You could say. Water came up because of all the wind.
Yeah.
Like we're not talking a slight breeze. We're talking 30-mile-an-hour gut. Like
Oh,
big
absolutely.
stuff. And so we're in the creek and fishing all day, and we don't have to deal with the wind and all that. We come out of the mouth of Cache Creek.
Yeah.
You've been to Clear Lake
No.
enough times to know?
I haven't been there at all.
Oh, you got to come with. Oh, okay. Well, it's the drainage. It's the bottom of the lake. It's the drainage.
Okay.
So, and it's like the mouth is like there, and then it goes down and it winds like several miles. And it's small.
Yeah.
Goes through. But anyway, so we're fishing, and we didn't have to deal with the wind, or we didn't have to deal with any of that. But we had the push pull. So we come out, and the wind is ferocious, and the guy's talking like he wants to go run, and I'm like, man, it's gonna thrash us in this little aluminum boat. And then so we fished and we stayed close waiting. I talked to him the next day after weigh-in when it wasn't windy, and I was like, how'd you do? And he's like, oh yeah, whatever, similar. Like he caught 16, 17, whatever. And the guy behind him caught like 19, like more than him again, like finesse fishing. And then so I asked him, I was like, how was it going through there? Because I'm like, he had a little skinny, scrawny guy. And I was like, so did the boat float over a lot easier in the snag? He's like, actually, he's like, you know what? He's like, it was harder. We got hung up and stuck on some spots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where we didn't, because the water was higher.
Because the
on
wind
wind
was pushing more
it down.
water into it.
Yeah. And
Sure.
so on the lake, the same thing happens. Eventually, the water in a long end of the lake, like you might see it like in Harvey Arm or something like that, or a place where it really funnels down. But like Sambucini in a bowl, you don't. But the wind definitely creates a current still, and then changes water temperature. Everything.
So
Everything
which
with
way
that.
do you fish in the wind?
I try and if it costs you backlash, I still cast in the wind as much as possible and bring them down. But just consciously, you kind of have to know, like if you're fishing the tail end or where it's really windy, like depending on where you're fishing, if the wind's facing one way, the water underneath might actually be going a different direction. And so you may be fishing downwind in your mind, but the fish are still positioned into the current. And so you still need to present it if you know where you're fishing, like where they would be, like if it was just surface flow.
Yeah.
Our San Diego lakes are kind of cool, special. I don't know.
I mean, it would be for every lake, though.
Yeah, it would be. But like that's the only place, like Harvey and El Cap are the only two that I can really think of that like it's more. And Harvey not so much, but El Cap north end is where that happens.
Yeah.
Or if the wind was blowing straight into Conejos, then it would happen a little bit. Like
Right.
you'd blow and then the bottom
Maybe a
is
little
moving.
bit, yeah.
But it's just
It's not very
generation.
big.
It's not like the waves are going to be big. It's just the wind pushing and the water has to go somewhere, so it still undertows back out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It has to be. It would have to be sustained for a while.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For a few hours anyway. Something for it to.
Well, yeah. So I don't know, probably last thing before you lose your mind or your battery runs out. So on Mojave,
Oh, it's plugged in.
So on Mojave, my wife and I went to Mojave, and you go to Mojave, it's a commitment. We're going
I'm going this week.
We're going 4 days, right? So we're going,
Yeah.
and so we got the camper, we're going, and forecast is supposed to be good, right? Wind forecast. You show up, red flag. Next day they're calling double red flag, and she's like, "Oh, do you want to go home or turn around?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I just drove 8 hours or whatever, And I'm like, after fishing it enough, I know. I'm like, well, we can go here and fish.
Yeah.
We can go here and
Yeah.
fish. We can launch here and then go a mile, and then
Mhm.
we're good,
Mhm.
But we've been there, and we've gone down from Cottonwood, and we've gone all the way to Catherine's to fish because we worked some spot like my milk run and stuff, and we're in Catherine's and we're catching fish, and then it's windy and it's blowing up lake, it goes north south usually or south,
Mhm.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're sitting there and we're tucked tail, like fishing where we can, waiting for the opportunity, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's getting late or whatever, the winds die down.
Yeah.
So it becomes glass at Catherine's.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, it's almost sun, whatever, sundownish. And it's like, let's go. And so we left Catherine's to Cottonwood, which is 20 whatever miles difference.
Uh-huh.
And I'm driving on plane, and it's getting darker and darker and darker because I waited really, And so all of a sudden it's like dark enough. I'm using my GPS.
Yeah.
And I was in ba-boom, ba-boom. I caught up to the wind and the waves.
Oh yeah.
The wind was gone.
Yeah.
The waves
Yes.
were rolling.
Yeah.
Waves don't just flatten out.
No.
That's everything. They don't just go when the wind stops.
Yeah.
Like they were rolling up lake still, and it was not windy when I left by a bit. So I literally caught up to the swells.
Was it so? But there was no wind there. It was just swells.
It was just the swells.
Yeah.
And it
Have
was
you seen it being windy on one side of the lake
grease on the other.
and grease on the other? But you're getting the swell from it. Yeah, that happens at Pyramid a lot.
Up at the Nevada Pyramid.
Yeah, Nevada Pyramid.
Not LA.
It's so big.
Yeah.
It's
I've
it's
followed
30 miles long.
I followed some of
11
the fly
miles
fishermen
across.
and some of the things too. And the
Yeah.
guy, I've seen some of the posts. And they talk about the high wind dangers and stuff like that.
It's nuts.
That's the same thing. That's
It's a-
why I
and
hate
it's a
center
toilet
console.
bowl.
That's why I'm like, oh, I bring a center console. I wouldn't bring a
It's-
bass boat.
It's not like any one prominent direction. It's like
No,
one
yeah.
day is from the south,
Desert,
and
it's a
one day is
free-for-all.
from the
Yeah.
north.
Yeah. It's a free for all. It's just same thing like going up against the mountains at El Cap because the altitude creates wind
Yeah.
changes and stuff. So.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
All right, we're good.